Good morning, and you are very welcome to Scale Ireland's first Regional Startup Summit, coming live here from Cork and supported by Microsoft, Hatfield Green, Atlantic Bridge and Republic of Work. My name is Martina Fitzgerald and I am the CEO of Scale Ireland, which represents, supports and advocates on behalf of Indigenous tech startup and scale-up companies. And there are currently 2,000 startups right around the country employing 47,000 people. And for every one job in this sector, 5 more created in the wider economy. And that's why we are hosting this Regional Startup Summit, to ensure we have the right conditions to ensure entrepreneurs based around the country are starting, scaling and expanding their companies to create more innovation, more employment and more exports, and to make Ireland a leading location for innovation. And that simply cannot happen without a regional approach. Now, we are delighted this morning that the event is being launched by Taoiseach Micheál Martin, who joins us here in studio, which highlights the importance and potential of the sector. And we are also delighted that Minister Michael Mcgrath and later Minister Simon Harris will be delivering keynote speeches. And they will be joining leading entrepreneurs, investors, academics and experts to look at how best we can support startups nationwide. Now, we have 3 panels today. The first on supporting startups in our regions from 10 to 11. The second to support diverse and impactful entrepreneurs in our regions. And also then at 11 to 12, the third to promote young entrepreneurs and startups at third level from 12 to 1. Now, these are very important conversations. It is critical that Indigenous startups are not held back as they are expanding their companies globally. We need the right conditions for them to succeed. So without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to the Chair of Scale Ireland, Brian Caulfield, who will introduce the Taoiseach.
Thank you, Martina. I'm delighted that Scale Ireland is hosting its first Regional Startup Summit here in Cork, which is home to around 190 startups. Cork-based companies like Teamwork, WorkVivo, Altada, and GlobeTech are thriving and expanding their operations and reach in markets across the world. And there are so many more startup successes in every region. For instance, the Castlebar-based fintech company Payslip recently announced plans to hire 150 new employees, while Nearform, which developed the COVID tracker app, has expanded internationally from its base in Dromore in Waterford. The Indigenous sector is growing rapidly, but there are still many obstacles that founders and companies need to overcome, which are highlighted in our State of Startup survey, which we're publishing today. 230 founders and CEOs across the country completed the survey, and not surprisingly, access to finance and the recruitment and retention of staff are key challenges. Worryingly, though, the majority of those who contributed to the survey have not availed of state support schemes, and we need to examine why some of those schemes are not attractive to startups. We need to make them more user-friendly. We'll have an opportunity to discuss these important and pressing issues shortly, but first we're delighted to be joined by the Taoiseach Micheál Martin, who will officially launch our first Regional Startup Summit from Cork with a keynote address. Taoiseach, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, Brian. Thank you, Brian, for the introduction and for inviting me to say a few words. And I'm delighted to be here this morning at Scale Ireland's Regional Startup Summit here in Cork. The challenges of the pandemic, coming on top of the challenges of Brexit, have been immense for Ireland's enterprises. The government I lead has helped to protect businesses and to safeguard thousands of jobs through comprehensive enterprise and labour market supports and interventions. But it was the resilience, the adaptability and innovation demonstrated by enterprise itself, the length and breadth of this country, that was truly remarkable. As the economy reshapes and recovers, Ireland's creative and entrepreneurial spirit is stronger than ever. We need to create in our society a culture that defends, that nurtures, and that celebrates entrepreneurship, free trade, and international connectivity. That said, as we re-emerge from the pandemic, we do so facing a changed and more competitive global landscape, one where the accelerating digital and decarbonisation transitions are to the fore. These changes bring areas of opportunity and growth that, with the right enabling environment, can be seized upon and fully realised. Our economic recovery plan launched last year is rooted in more sustainable, productive and resilient jobs, aligned with our green and digital ambitions. It places a strong focus on renewal, balanced regional development and leveraging our unique dynamic ecosystem. That means focusing on our competitiveness and productivity, supporting increased digitalisation, facilitating collaboration and clustering, supporting enterprise to decarbonise, nurturing our talent and skills, and boosting our research and development. These areas, which are supported by dedicated existing and forthcoming plans and strategies, are central to Ireland's advanced economy. The role of government is to create the favourable conditions within which ideas, research, enterprise, entrepreneurship and innovation can flourish. However, it is businesses, new and old, that create the employment opportunities. Startups and small businesses are the backbone of the Irish economy. Entrepreneurs starting, scaling and exporting across every region of Ireland are vital to our collective future success. The SME and Entrepreneurship Growth Plan provides government with a set of recommendations directly from you, the business community, on how to build the best business and regulatory environment possible for SMEs and entrepreneurs to grow and scale over time. Priority areas include access to finance, digital transformation and clustering and networks. Work is underway across a number of government departments and agencies to drive these reforms forward, which will help our SMEs to become more sustainable, productive and competitive over the longer term. Recognising the value of a vibrant startup environment, Government, together with Enterprise Ireland, provides a range of financial and non-financial supports to foster increased entrepreneurial activity throughout the country. I would like to highlight and pay tribute to the work that was undertaken by Enterprise Ireland and the local enterprise offices working closely together over the pandemic to design, implement and manage a range of supports to Irish businesses right across the country. Despite the enormous challenges faced by Irish enterprise, client companies of Enterprise Ireland and the local enterprise offices showed great resilience. Enterprise Ireland's new 3-year strategy, Leading in a Changing World, builds on this resilience and puts a focus on diversifying our exports, increasing the number of startups by 20% and on delivering growth across all regions. I'm not sure how widely this is known, but Enterprise Ireland is the largest venture capital investor in the world by deal count, and a 5th round of the Seed and Venture Capital Scheme was called in 2019, with a further allocation of 185 million to be committed over the lifetime of the scheme to 2024. I am happy to note that each call to date has had significant interest and applications, showing the importance of schemes like this to early stage and pre-seed companies. I know that you will be hearing from some very impressive examples of successful businesses later this morning. I would like to congratulate Fiona in particular as one of Enterprise Ireland's most successful fintech clients for achieving unicorn status last year. Indeed, technology and digitalisation is central to transforming small businesses, opening up new opportunities and markets, cost reductions and productivity gains. Ireland's forthcoming National Digital Strategy will set out a pathway to drive and enable the digital transition across the economy and society, leveraging Ireland's strengths and bridging the digital divides across enterprise and wider society. Indeed, the pandemic has shown us all how we can work, learn and use services differently without the boundaries of location. It will build upon the strong focus on digitalisation in Ireland's National Recovery and Resilience Plan. A digital transition fund is being established as part of this plan. And this is an 85 million multi-annual fund which will run until 2026. Under budget 2022, 10 million was allocated to the fund and the first call will be announced by mid-2022. It will also complement Ireland's national AI strategy, AI Here for Good, which was published in July 2021. Implementation is underway, working with the new Enterprise Digital Advisory Forum. Accessing the skills and expertise, technologies and know-how developed in the publicly funded research sector can enable businesses to develop faster and work smarter, set new standards, grow jobs and sales and stay ahead of the competition. The benefits of increased collaboration and knowledge sharing both within industry and between industry and academia and research institutions is clear. A national clustering policy and enabling framework is currently being developed, which will help maximise the potential of collaboration. The government is committed to creating better opportunities through education and research to ensure that Ireland is a global leader in research and innovation. As I say every time and everywhere I get the chance, education, research and innovation is the bedrock of our country's success to date and the best investment we can make to ensure future progress. It's why we established the new Department of Further and Higher Education Research, Innovation and Science. And it is why the forthcoming National Research and Innovation Strategy is so important. In that strategy, we want to set a vision and ambition for Ireland's research and innovation system that all actors can identify with and contribute to, with ambitious and achievable national strategic goals and objectives out to 2027. Regional enterprise development and sustainable local job creation is a clear priority of this government. To this end, the Department of Enterprise, Trade and Employment is overseeing the development of 9 new regional enterprise plans to 2024. These new plans are expected to launch in the regions over the coming weeks and are in addition to a number of existing funds that are in place. Our work in this area builds on the focus that is to the fore in the renewed National Development Plan, which in turn supports sustainable growth that benefits every region, town and city across Ireland. The plan also reinforces our commitment to bringing broadband to every corner of rural Ireland. The last 2 years has shown how resilient, adaptable and inventive the enterprise community in Ireland is. Starting a new venture is a daunting task, even in the best of times. But looking at the quality of businesses engaging with this initiative, I have no doubt that the great spirit of Irish entrepreneurship will prevail. I would like to congratulate Scale Ireland for the event today, which helps share experiences, allowing budding startups to draw from the experience of champions, and I hope successfully stand on the shoulders of giants. The work that you are all doing is genuinely important. It is part of the foundation of our country's future prosperity, and I thank you for it. Go to Mcgrath, Galer.
Thank you, Taoiseach. We look forward to hearing from you further following our panel discussion. Now, today's event would not have taken place without the support of Microsoft, and I'm delighted to welcome the General Manager of Microsoft Ireland, Anne Sheehan.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian, and welcome to everyone joining us online to what I know will be a really insightful morning of discussion. I would also like to welcome the Taoiseach. Your attendance today is a sign of how important entrepreneurs and startups are for our economy. Now, I've been fortunate enough to work with many founders and startup businesses, and some of you joining us here today are really important partners of Microsoft. And we've seen firsthand the innovation and resilience that make you a vital part of Ireland's economy. Microsoft is delighted to support Scale Ireland and the first Regional Startup Summit. The Startup Survey has provided valuable insights for stakeholders as to the key challenges they face, such as access to capital and skills gaps in the areas of sales and marketing and sustainability planning. There is no doubt in my mind that it is the collective responsibility of all organisations to help address these issues. We all need to work together to create the best financial and policy supports to enable Ireland startups to grow their business. It is Microsoft's priority to help new businesses be digital-first organisations using the tools and solutions that will help them fulfil their growth ambitions. We know that the startups of today often become business leaders of tomorrow, and nurturing Ireland's talent pipeline for current and future roles is critical. That is why we created programmes to help encourage people of all backgrounds and levels of experience to gain the digital skills needed to participate in our economy. Programmes that support from primary school right through to those returning to work, such as Microsoft Dream Space, which has digitally enabled 80,000 school students in Ireland to date and Step Into Tech, which aims to support 10,000 people develop the skills they need to transition into digital roles, contributing to the digital talent pipeline. Over the years, we have successfully onboarded hundreds of startups through the Microsoft Startup Programme right here in Ireland. Here, startups have exclusive access to technology, mentorship and business support, regardless of where they are in their startup journey. Our goal is to provide a customised set of support offerings and resources that grow organisations from idea to exit. It is absolutely essential that collectively we have the appropriate programmes that enable startups to thrive. We need to make it simple and accessible so that founders can spend their time where it needs to be, on their business. Today's Startup Summit is, I hope, the start of the kind of collaboration that is needed to nurture and support the success of both ambitious and innovative startups. This collaboration comes at a great time where Microsoft is delighted to support the startup ecosystem in Ireland and the organisations that are vital to our economic and social future. Thank you.
And thank you, and to Microsoft for all your support. Now, the Taoiseach is staying with us, and he's going to hear about the potential and also some of the issues facing startups around the country. And I'm delighted to be joined by our 5 special guests. Now, firstly, we're delighted to be joined by Peter Coffinger. Peter is the co-founder and CEO of Teamwork, which is a project management software company headquartered here in Cork with over 24,000 customers in 170 countries and 280 staff working across 18 countries. And Teamwork secured $70 million in investment last year. And its clients include Disney, Spotify, PayPal, Netflix, to name but a few. So you're very welcome, Peter. We're also delighted to be joined by Niall Toomey, who is the co-founder and Chief Technology Officer of Finergo, which employs 500 people here in Ireland and another 500 across the world. And Finergo designs and develops client lifecycle management technologies. And last year, as the Taoiseach mentioned, it gained tech unicorn status, which means it's now valued at more than $1 billion. And by the way, since the company was established 13 years ago, Niall has worked remotely from Cork. Now, Brian.
We're also joined by Mary Rogers, the CEO of Galway City Innovation District and also CEO of the Irish Tech Hub Network, which comprises 5 leading hubs across the island of Ireland, supporting startups and building the tech ecosystem in Cork, Galway, Dublin, Kerry and Belfast. The Portershed Hub in Galway, which Mary runs, is shortly moving to new premises in Galway, which will have a capacity to accommodate up to 300 startups. Our next speaker is Jillian Buckley, who is the investment manager with Western Development Commission, which promotes social and economic development in the Western region. The Commission's investment fund provides loans and equity to businesses and local communities in the region. And Jillian has overseen the investment of over €70 million in 250 SMEs, community and micro enterprises.
And finally, we are joined today by Neil Sullivan, who is the co-founder of Hatfield Green, which is a leading executive search company with offices in Dublin, Donegal, London. And Hatfield Green specialises in hiring technology leaders and board executives. So Neil will be very well placed today to comment on some of the issues raised. You are all very welcome. And I'm going to start with you, Peter. You and your founder, Dan Mackey, have built this global company from your base here in Cork. Can you tell us about it and your expansion plans, because they are ambitious?
Hi, Martina. Good morning. Thanks. Firstly, it's an honour to be here today. Yes, Dan and I started building websites for people way back in 1999, and we found an opportunity in the market to build software that could help agencies like us manage their workload, and we spun out our company, teamwork.com. Now, thanks to the distribution possible with the internet, today Teamwork is one of the leading products in our category with over 18,000 customers all around the world. And we've actually grown now. You said 280 staff there. I can tell you we're 310 today. We're still headquartered here in Cork, and we have other offices in Belfast, Amsterdam, and Boston. Now, many people find it intriguing that we managed to scale teamwork.com to well over $35 million annual revenue in a competitive market from Cork without raising a penny in finance. And as you mentioned there, Martina, that changed a few months ago when we took on investment for the first time and raised $70 million. And we took on that investment to accelerate our growth. We have big ambitions to become the market-leading platform for agencies with hundreds of millions in revenue. And I love that in the world we live in, our small Cork company has been able to compete with some of the biggest, most well-financed companies in the world and win.
And Peter, your great advertisement for the sector, also a very good news on the increased number that you're employing, and it's going up because you have great expansion plans for the year ahead, but you are also facing some challenges in terms critically of growing that team.
That's right, Martina. I mean, we have plans this year to hire over 130 people. 92 of those jobs will be based in Ireland, and all of those are well-paid, high-tech jobs. Now, at this moment in time, it is very likely that we will fall short of our plans, and that hiring is going to be our biggest limiting factor to scaling. We all know there's a shortage of workers, and in the recent Scale Ireland survey, Eurostat said that there's a key trend in that attracting and keeping staff is becoming more difficult for startups. I think it was 45% of companies said they found it more difficult last year to hire staff, and another 41% have lost staff in 2021, which matches our experience. Now, in the environment we're in as well, it has led to some of the larger multinationals paying 2 to 3x typical salaries and aggressively poaching from smaller companies like us. It's just the environment we're in, but it's critical that we retain and attract as many employees as possible. So how can we do that? Well, one of the best tools at our disposal as a scale-up to attract and retain great people is share options. And Taoiseach and Minister Mcgrath, I'm sure you have both seen the proposal from Scale Ireland to remove the limits on the amount of share options we can grant in any year and to raise the overall cap. I believe that these proposals are sensible, and their implementation would honestly be a game changer for us and for our sector.
And Peter, finally, you're also a strong advocate for building a world-class ecosystem here in Ireland and in Cork, and that is important.
Definitely. In fact, I've done a lot of thinking about what I want for myself, but one of my life goals is to nurture the next generation of Irish software startups. I've done a lot of thinking and research on this topic, and here's how I see the overall landscape in brief. I think Ireland has done incredibly well through FDI these last 70 years, and I think the IDA in particular and the governments that supported them have done a wonderful job and deserve a lot of credit. However, we all know the landscape is changing, and our 12.5% corporation tax is likely unsustainable if we're honest. And if we take the long-term perspective, what I'm worried about is that we may have a slow drain on our multinational tax base over the next 30 to 50 years. So I believe the time is right to start making serious investments in our nation's future. And I believe that Ireland Inc. should concentrate its strategy on intangible goods. The two obvious candidates being finance and software. And I actually think we can learn a lot of lessons from the Israel model. Israel is often referred to as the startup nation. I think there's a lot of similarities between Ireland and Israel, actually, believe it or not, and that we could learn a lot from their economic policies. Just quickly, I think some of the things we need to do, we need to switch to providing low interest loans instead of taking equity in startups. We need to ramp up our investment in high potential startups significantly. We need to minimize the amount of red tape around startups, especially R&D. Smaller companies don't avail of R&D because it's too onerous. We need to provide innovation centers all around the country, provide internet, coffee, and advice. Also encourage more companies to bootstrap. At the moment, we're pushing everybody into matched funding and going the equity route. I think we need to accelerate the rollout of high-speed internet. And finally, I think we need to introduce computer skills and programming classes in all our secondary schools. And also, if we can promote entrepreneurship in primary school as well. So we create an environment where we don't stigmatize failure. And just summing up, I believe we're a smart, hardworking, English-speaking country. We're perfectly situated between the US and Europe. And I think the internet has honestly changed everything. And I think that with the right government policies and support, we can bring jobs, prosperity to every corner of Ireland and try for the next 70 years and beyond.
Thank you, Peter. And we're now going to turn to Niall and Finergo, because Finergo, as the Taoiseach mentioned, is a phenomenally successful company, having gained unicorn status during the pandemic, demonstrating its global growth and also its potential. And like Peter, Niall, you will also be expanding your operations in the regions this year. Can you tell us about your company and also those plans, those ambitious plans?
Yeah, thanks, Martina. So delighted to be here, first off. So we started in 2009, myself and my co-founder, Mark Murphy. We had both come from financial services backgrounds. we'd worked in banks, and we just knew they were ripe for disruption. It was, when you work inside a large financial institution, you know, inefficient, how manual it is. And in 2009, we kind of rode the wave of, with the financial collapse, the amount of regulation that was coming on the financial service industry and the amount of fin crime problems they had, as well as the really poor customer experience. So we went to tackle that. We kind of made a decision very early. I was actually just moving back to Ireland. We said, look, we want to be an Irish headquartered company that operates globally. We made that decision very early on in our journey. So there's three of us at the beginning, and we said that's the way we wanted to operate. And over the last 13 years, we've grown to 1,000 people. 500 of them are based in Ireland. And really, for us, the reputation of being an Irish company has really helped internationally. The brand Ireland is incredibly strong, as well as the network that allows access to those international locations. But as a company, very much an Irish HQ'd company. As you say, I live in Cork. We have a hub in Cork, and the way we operate now is we'll hire anywhere in Ireland. When we have enough people in certain locations, we plan to create hubs around those people if that's what they want. And it's Peter mentioned it, just the talents for the war for talent is so competitive. They're the type of things you have to do. But we set ourselves up day one to be a distributor's company, to operate anywhere, to be ultra mobile because of the nature of our client base. And we've always had that in our DNA from the beginning. And with the pandemic, you know, it really didn't affect us in the slightest. We were already set up to operate like that and engage with our clients that way. Our plan for the future is just recently got backed for a funding round. We have a very ambitious investors. They want to see us grow in terms of value 4 to 5 times what we currently are worth today. That means equivalent jobs coming. We've probably 60 plus jobs open in Ireland anywhere. And as we grow, at least 50-60% of our work base will continue to be in Ireland, with the rest in our international locations based on the different locations we serve.
And Niall, can I ask you, you mentioned their talent like Peter. What are the critical issues do you see facing companies, many of which want to replicate your success?
Well, I suppose if I could take the learnings we had, it's only on reflection, to be honest with you. First thing is we did leverage Enterprise Ireland. It's been incredible for us. They were a gateway internationally. They gave us a great, because we had no brand initially. They gave us, open doors for us that we wouldn't have been able to open. Finance is key. And again, it's only on reflection. We were actually incubated out of another company. So we were kind of insulated from that. So I would say who you pick for finance. So initially it was Ergo, John Purdy's company. Then we came along, got finance from the people who had exited Norcom, who were in a very similar space to us, who'd grown the company to a size, above what we were at the time. So they gave us huge mentorship. It was a lot more than just the capital. It's who we're getting the capital from. And then we got a PE round back in 2015, Insight Ventures. And, they had done, again, they'd grown to the $1 billion kind of range, and we wanted to go there. And they pretty much had the playbook for everything. So like product management, a discipline that's not very strong in Ireland. Here's the book on how to do product management. Here are the people you need to talk to. Entering new markets. This is how you enter Australia. This is how you enter, etc. They just had the playbook. So it was a lot more than capital. I will say the finance side, when I look at our journey, has always been more than just the money they're giving us. It's who's giving us the money and the help they're giving beyond it. We have leveraged the R&D grants. I will attest that somebody who's written up the submissions many times. It is very laborious. It's very hard to do. You do need third-party help for it, and it's very narrow. I will say it's been beneficial to us, but it's very narrow interpretation of what type of costs and what type of work actually falls in this remit. So while we've leveraged it and it's been helping, I would advise everybody to do it if they can. There is quite a lot of overhead and it's very narrow in its interpretation.
And can I ask
the other thing
sorry for cutting across. Can I ask you very briefly, there are concerns about companies like yours who have started and scaled here that they might move elsewhere where they get to a certain size. Can I ask you about your own plans for Finergo?
Yeah, we kind of came to that crossroads early on in our journeys because our beachhead, our first market was North America. It wasn't Ireland, it wasn't Europe for various reasons. We very much said had a global mentality, and we said take advantage of the strengths we have here. We do have an incredibly talented workforce. Geographically and language and connections, like the Irish diaspora is incredible for pushing Irish products. It was actually fantastic. Like we operate America, Europe, Australia, actually where we're positioned from a logistics perspective and the ability to travel when you need to travel is actually fantastic. So, to the question, as we grow, it will always continue. At least 50-60% will be in Ireland. We've no need to move. We passed that point many years ago. And I will say, look, when you think of time to market, you may be tempted to move to a certain market to reduce that time to market and get closer to your clients. But you got to think globally. That won't be your market for long. You're going to be operating globally. So stick to a place that can help you operate globally. And Ireland's definitely a place. The challenges Peter outlined them. There's talent. It's the infrastructure. I mean, we could get talent into Ireland. But can they get houses? Can their family actually live here? It's that infrastructure play is difficult. And as we've grown our Irish base, we've gotten so many fantastic people from abroad, not just local people, and that's really important. But we do have a sense of pushback now from people from abroad saying, well, actually, I've heard coming to Cork, come to Dublin, come to wherever, actually it's difficult to get houses, it's difficult to get my children to school. So that is an inhibitor as we scale and grow. But certainly our plans continue. We're 1,000 people today. Will grow, will be 2,000 or 3,000, in a couple of years' time if we continue on our growth trajectory. At least 50-60% of that will be based here in any region, in any location in Ireland.
And we wish you well on that journey, Niall, and congratulations. Brian.
Mary, you're very welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about the role and importance of a vibrant tech hub network in Ireland?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone, and thank you. We know that startups likes to create, innovate, and collaborate. Like Peter said, music to my ear is internet, coffee, and advice. I mean, that's what it's all about. And we've seen the impact of a tech hub firsthand in the west of Ireland with the Portershed. And that's where I'm broadcasting from this morning, from the Portershed in Eyre Square. We're open since 2016, supported the creation of more than 720 jobs. Our companies have raised more than 35 million, and we've had more than 10,000 visitors through the door. They're not here for the desk. Like, the Portershed is so much more than a desk. They're here for the network and the contacts and the collaboration and the serendipity over the coffee machine. Just last year, like in 2021, during the pandemic, 3 new companies were formed from Portershed members. And that's due to the conversations. And they're in sustainability and esports and logistics, all sectors that are scaling. And again, our focus is always on those innovation-driven enterprises, the ones that will scale fast and hire and create more jobs. For us, it's all about creating jobs, high-value, sustainable jobs in the west of Ireland. But for the tech hubs around the country, it's a similar mantra. We want to create that all-Ireland island of innovation, a true island of innovation. And we can do that together. We're moving to Bowling Green, as Brian said, in March 22, so just 4 weeks away. We're down to the final touches. And it's so exciting to go to a new space and to take the learnings from the Portershed and the evolving work procedures. Like we now have a collision space and a podcast studio and a hybrid working model, so we can accommodate Niall's team when they want to come to an innovation hub in Galway. So we've taken all these things on board, and it's created a really exciting space. And that's one of 2 buildings that will open this year. In October, we'll open up the Connacht Tribune, which is another larger space, 3 floors, roof deck, dedicated event space. And all these are things that our startups need and in order to scale and collaborate. And it's through the support of the Government and Enterprise Ireland that we're able to do this, and the Western Development Commission. Thank you, Jillian. All ththese things make it work. So it's all of that working together piece. And I think that's what tech hubs do really well. We focus on programs, accelerators, pre-accelerators, founders weekends, hackathons. We ask our communities, what do you need? And we deliver it. And working with the multinationals and our partners all over Ireland makes that work for us.
Thanks. That sounds absolutely fantastic. But I'm sure there are challenges. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the challenges you face and how those might be alleviated.
Yeah, so the Portershed is a member of the Irish Tech Hub Network. So there's 6 hubs, 1 Ormeau Bats in Belfast, RDI in Kerry, Republic of Work in Cork, Ludgate in Cork, and Dogpatch Labs in Dublin. And Dogpatch initiated the Irish Tech Hub Network back in 2019. And the idea was to come together and brainstorm, develop best practices, hub and spoke model, educate each other, downloads for our teams. And that's worked really well. And we know it has, because Scotland have approached the Irish Tech Hub Network to basically copy that model. And the government in Scotland are putting funding behind that, 50 million in funding to develop a Scottish Irish Tech Hub Network. And so we know that works. And we would like to deliver more of that. So if we had funding, we want to collaborate more with the multinationals. We know the new mantra, like what has to be, is that the startups need to grow alongside the multinationals. We need to be working together to avail of the many mentors and supports from the multinationals, and also for the startups for sandboxing and corporate innovation and so on. There's so many opportunities. And the way to do that is to put funding behind it to support it. Just this week, I'll give a quick shout out to Republic of Work, because they have the Teamwork Catalyst program that closes on Sunday. And it's these collaborations with corporate that provide energy and inspiration and innovation for the startups. So from our perspective, our ask from the Irish Tech Hub Network is for funding to drive that forward. We like to collaborate and share as much as possible, but currently we're doing it on a volunteer basis.
Thanks very much, Mary. I'm going to turn to Jillian now. Jillian, we heard about the importance of a strong tech hub network from Mary. The Western Development Commission has actually been advocating for remote working for more than 20 years. Tell us about that.
That's correct, Brian. Good morning, everybody. Since our formation in 1997, we've advocated what we called at the time teleworking, and then began e-working, now remote working, and I hope they come up with a better term, because it's connected or distributed working, I think, is a much better model. We saw the west of Ireland as a great place to live, work and do business, and that internet connection and broadband were going to be level the playing field from a geographical basis. It's taken a global pandemic to kind of prove the model, which is quite astonishing, but it is being proved. Even what we're doing here today is testament to that. We ourselves as an organisation have been teleworking. So when people said, how are you managing working from home? I'm saying, I've been doing it for 20 odd years here. It's wonderful. We all know there's huge benefits. From our perspective, it will ensure that we have balanced regional development, and the guys have explained that you can employ high quality people in all over globally and in rural Ireland. We see it as revitalising our towns and villages. It allows people to have a work-life balance. If it's done right, it can reduce costs for both the employer and the employee. But it's a game changer from our perspective, and I think it's been proved. And tying in with that into what Mary is saying, and also what Peter was advocating, we're working with our own department on developing the 400 hubs all over the country, so that they can become a resource for their towns and villages to attract and retain jobs in their communities, and those people will give back to their communities. Everything from the tidy towns to the local GA club. You'll have a really revitalised rural and community environment, and we much have more balanced regional development. And this is not a zero game against big cities. This is about spreading the opportunity to everybody in order that we have a much more robust and sustainable country going forward.
Thanks, Jillian. We've seen from our survey that access to finance is still one of the biggest challenges facing founders. What's your perspective on how to address this?
Yeah, so I'm giving away my age now, but I have been working in supporting and investing in startups and scale-ups for over 20 years. I won't say how many more over 20 years, but it's been quite a time. I'm a public servant. I'm passionate about supporting startups and scale-ups, and as you mentioned earlier, I've supported over 200 enterprises in my investment journey. But for us, and I think the state does a phenomenal job, but there's only so much we can do. And the private sector, in fairness to ourselves, the private sector does these things better and faster. But we need to, I think that Taoiseach said earlier, we need to enable private sector to fill that gap. And I think the tax code is a huge opportunity. The guys again have mentioned about simplifying what's out there. They're really good supports, but we seem to overcomplicate them. We need to simplify them, especially for the very early stage. The bureaucracy burden has to be lightened. It has to be promoted more. When I was doing a little bit of research, I found out that Keep incentive in 2018, less than 100 employees got access to share options. Here's a fantastic opportunity, but it's not being utilised. Why is that? It's too complicated and it's not being promoted. So they're the two kind of matters I would say. And for us, again, it leverages out the support like Enterprise Ireland, like our Western Investment Fund, ISIP, and that creates more jobs. And we know from our own research in the Irish Venture Capital Association that in innovation-driven enterprises grow employment at 10 times the rate that the wider economy. That's 10 times. That's phenomenal. And that that's majority, I think around 77% is graduate employment. So you're talking about really high caliber employment. So again, that all feeds back into the exchequer in taxes and wealth and generation. And there's another area I'd like to highlight around the auto-enrollment, enrollment pension scheme. That to us is a once in a lifetime generation opportunity to ensure that there's a much broader base of private funding, the pension funds of our future citizens, that can be deployed now to create jobs and wealth in the country and safeguard the future pensions. It's a huge opportunity to ensure that there is institutional funding available to the venture capitalists and the PEs to support the kind of companies that we're hearing about this morning.
Thank you, Jillian. Martina.
And finally, to Neil, I was just wondering, Neil, do our survey findings today and also the testimonies really of everyone, including our two founders, Peter and Niall, do they reflect what you are experiencing day to day in terms of the challenges facing startups, recruiting and retaining senior staff in your role?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. 100% up and down the country. We've never seen as many vacancies. I've been living here for 15 years now, and it's brilliant to see, it's brilliant to be part of it. But we've never seen as much job creation, and there really is a talent shortage and talent challenge out there. The survey certainly echoes that, particularly with maybe kind of leadership roles in maybe finance, technology, HR, across the board, sales, which is it's a great problem to try and solve. But looking at the survey and listening to the rest of the panel today, it clearly echoes the things that are standing out for us, and that is the share option scheme does not seem to be fit for purpose. So we've got to look at ways that we can maybe tweak that. From a leadership hiring perspective, if we're trying to attract maybe a CTO from a multinational business that now wants to work for an early stage technology business, there needs to be an incentive for them to do that if they are going to be willing to trade off some of their guaranteed income, which they are willing to do, but they have to have a meaningful slice of the pie, and there needs to be an incentive for them to even think about trading off that. So we just got to put our heads together and see if there's something we can do to tweak it and make it incentivizing for the employer and make it incentivizing for the candidates wishing to join that employer. The second thing, the visa processing times are still a bit too long in comparison to some of our competitors for talent in Germany and in Holland. 4 to 5 months to process a critical skills visa. Unfortunately, we just need to put our heads together and see how we can improve that. We have an incredible, diverse, amazing talent pool here who come here for further studies, further education. We need to keep them. And startups and in the regions have a tremendous opportunity to attract that talent. And they're usually very courageous, brilliant people that even come here in the first place. So let's make it easy for them to stay and thrive and march on with their careers. But third thing, the most simple thing that we see really working very effectively is when organizations are radically honest about the type of organization they actually are. So rather than maybe putting the right foot forward in relation to their own story, just putting the most accurate foot forward, particularly for leadership hiring. So by that I mean, when you're doing job design and we're looking to ID the right person to join the business, how good is our recruitment process? How good is our engagement model? Is it honest? Is it transparent? Then we just attract the right people, which subsequently means we retain the right people, better cultures, and just better attraction and retention rates within those businesses.
And Neil, like Niall, you work remotely, you from Donegal. Can I ask you what trends you're seeing in terms of recruitment and retention of staff, senior roles, those people who want to remain in the regions?
No one's going to think I'm from Donegal listening to this accent. I'm a complete blowout. Yeah, London to Dublin to Donegal. Yeah, married an Irish girl from Donegal, and great place to live and work, and a brilliant place to grow a business. I must say, I'm up in Creevin, like the community enterprise and non-profit centre up in Donegal, there, North Donegal, and to see the grant money and the setups of the office environments, it's state-of-the-art facilities, listening to Jillian, listening to other people around it. It's great to see these vibrant, incredible places to work, incredible places to grow businesses. And yeah, I've been up there for the last couple of years and it's brilliant. But yeah, we need to work on the infrastructure though, in relation to making it, as Niall alluded to there as well, how we all piece it all together, just continue that competitiveness, because it's a great place to live and work and I love it. But we just need to tweak a little bit more the things so it's maybe easier to drive there. Anyway, that's another story.
We won't say anything about that. Okay, thank you very much, Neil. Now, thank you all for your contributions. And Taoiseach, you've heard from our entrepreneurs and from various stakeholders in the sector about the potential of the sector and startups and also some of the challenges they're facing. Can I ask you your own thoughts about it?
Yeah, well, I formerly as Minister for Enterprise for 4 years and worked with Enterprise Ireland and with IDA, and it was a wonderful voyage of discovery for me in many ways. I did many trade missions to all parts of the world with Irish startups and entrepreneurs. I said at the beginning of my speech just one point, and I'm just, again, I reiterate this having listened to everybody. We do need to make this debate more mainstream and centre stage in Irish society. Mm-hmm. It's something I've observed over the years. This is the very lifeblood of the country. It's what creates wealth to enable us to distribute wealth, to create the investment in education and social services. And I find from the national debate, it's, to a large extent, it's often marginalised and it's never mainstreamed in terms of culture, in terms of celebrating companies starting up, doing something new, making profit, reinvesting the profit, creating new companies. And I always say this, I'm consistently at it, it never gets debated in the Dáil. The idea of free trade, if you look at some of the debates of the last 10 years, one would imagine it was a terrible thing in terms of new trade agreements that have been devised by the European Union with, for example, Canada, or which is just very beneficial to many startups and to many small, medium companies who are now exporting more. So that's just a general point. We've got to keep working at making this culturally mainstream, that this actually is what makes Ireland tick, in my view, and we should be encouraging more and more people. I think the big takeaway there, which I just want to say to those, to the founders and those who've contributed, we are very conscious of the talent squeeze, the tightness in that situation. I've talked to the Taoiseach about the visa situation on economic recovery cabinet subcommittee in terms of really got to fast track a lot of that. To be fair, I think the new Department of Further Education, Higher Education is getting off to a strong start with the apprenticeship model, for example, is growing by 20% of the numbers applying, but also across the board and trying to develop new skills from our own indigenous space here. But we will need not just European talent, but we will need non-European talent coming into the country. And then, of course, we're very much aware of the need then to make sure that infrastructure, that housing piece in particular, is there. We will, the 30,000 startups at last year, for that 12 months pandemic hit us, we need to get to 35,000 per annum, in my view, if not more, steady kind of house completions to try and deal with that issue, because quality of life is a big issue for people. And I'm intrigued with I think it was it Jillian talked about you had a new term for remote working, which is distributional working and so on. I remember a thing called decentralisation, which caused blue murder one time in terms of political debate. Yeah. This is a more advanced form of decentralisation, and I think it's again, I think it's a great opportunity. I just think it can really, and I'm excited about the hubs that are being created all over rural Ireland now at the moment through the Department of Community Rural Affairs investments, because that will really enable people to work remotely as we roll out the broadband. But I think the acceleration of the creation of hubs, and then I just said, the Greenway active travel developments, huge investments, that will speak to quality of life. I think will help to attract people back to different locations across the country, because we desperately need regional balance. The more fundamental point, I think, it was Niall, the first Niall, sorry, I think, who mentioned, or was it Peter, sorry, it's Peter actually, about, okay, I'm just reading some stuff historically, and you go to that period of the late 1950s, 60, when Ireland made that, what now seems an obvious, but at the time was not, that transformation from being an inward to an outward-looking country, and to get the idea, beef up the idea, and get them attract investment in. Okay, and the last 50 years has been incredible success on the FDI front. Even today, Eli Lilly and Limerick, like that's just one hell of an investment on top of their 2,300 jobs already. Huge vote of confidence. But I would like to think the next 50 years, and it's not an either-or, by the way, both are connected. The next 50 years should represent a very significant, accelerated and advanced push on the Indigenous entrepreneur. That becomes the big story when people are looking back 50 years time or 50 years ahead and saying that was a big shift in the Irish approach. we do have to become more innovative around the share option stuff, and I'll let Michael come in on that with Pascal. I get what you're saying. We just need to, and the R&D stuff. I've heard this for 20 years about the regulatory overload or the challenges about applying for R&D. I'm, as you know, I'm passionate about R&D. I think it's key. Again, we've been incremental in loosening it up, and we probably need to make a bigger push there. The good news is in the recalibration, if I use that phrase, of the corporate tax frameworks, the R&D element has been preserved and retained, which was vital from the Irish point of view, and that I think is helpful. I've witnessed a transformation in our third level institutions in terms of R&D and connection with SMEs and so on. We just need to accelerate that more. And I'm hearing what you're saying about the red tape. We've got to go back to the people in charge here and say, look, who administer it, can we make this more friendly?
And by the way, Taoiseach, I think that we have brought all these issues centre stage now by you launching it here today. So thank you. And I'm also conscious you've been listening closely to the entrepreneurs, some of whom you work with and are partners with. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think if listening to the last 50 minutes, if it wasn't a reason to be massively ambitious, then I don't know what we do. And I think if we look at the potential, I guess, growth accelerators for the country going forward, like you have the multinationals, and of course we will continue to invest and grow in Ireland. But this is just a massive opportunity. And we have a history of, as a country, when we focus on things, we really can execute. And I think what we need to do is listen more, learn more and act more. I think, we've had some brilliant discussion this morning, and for me, the ingredients are there. When we look at education, I think Taoiseach make a really good point about it's got to start at primary school level. And when I look at, I talked about Dream Space, to put 80,000 kids, in the last kind of 2 years, with a huge appetite that just want digital skills. We need to embrace that much more and step into tech, which Microsoft launched a few months ago, and we aim to put 10,000 people through, put 1,000 people through that. And there are people that are in more traditional industries that want to get into digital skills, maybe a bit more older, advanced in their career, and already 150 of them have got jobs. We have to look to new areas for talent, and we have to think outside the box. It's not just the traditional areas. How can we, digitally enable more of society, and really, and it does start. Peter and I had a great discussion yesterday evening, because is there a psyche in our kids of afraid of failure? So how do we just unleash that and just say, go for it, So I think that's the first. The second is simplicity. And that's a challenge for any organisation. So how do we just make it simple? Broadband, I think, Peter, you said a broadband, a coffee and a place to hang out, So we have the National Broadband Plan. Can we go faster? We have the hubs. Do we need more of them? We've loads of coffee. What part how can Microsoft help in that? So I think simplicity, education, how do we all lean in together? And how do we, I think Taoiseach made just a brilliant point, how do we make this just our primary conversation? So it's not just this morning and then we all go in and do our own thing. So how do we all collectively come together as a community and, to finish where I started, have, really execute that trademark of we're brilliant in Ireland when we focus on something. So.
Thank you, Anne. I wonder, do we need a national coffee plan?
Taoiseach, national coffee plan.
For the green tea,
For the green tea,
So thank you, Anne, and also thank you to the Taoiseach for launching our summit. And we look forward to working with you and your colleagues to ensure that startups and founders succeed. We're now going to close this first panel session with a closing keynote address from the Minister for Public Expenditure and Reform, Michael Mcgrath. You're very welcome, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian. And it's hard to follow all of that. That was a really fantastic discussion, and I am genuinely delighted to join with Taoiseach here this morning to be part of Scale Ireland's very first Regional Startup Summit, live streamed, of course, from the AVC studios here in Cork. And I do want to congratulate you, Brian, as chair, and your CEO, Martina Fitzgerald, and all the team on putting together such a brilliant event, and listening to the positivity and the ambition that we have heard over the last hour or so. I think will inspire everyone on their journey as a startup or a scale-up in the tech space. And I think it is worth making the point that only founded in 2019, Scale Ireland has already made a big impact, driven by that dynamic leadership of Brian and Martina. And I want to acknowledge the immense work of your steering group and the invaluable support of Scale Ireland's partners and supporters. You have a vision of making Ireland a leading location for innovation and entrepreneurship, and you act as a voice for the Indigenous tech startup and scale-up companies. And the Taoiseach and I and our colleagues across government share your vision, and I think it's important that we state that. We value your insight and your expert knowledge, and we've heard much of it this morning so far, and we'll hear more of it later on. And we will continue to engage with you through the channels that already exist, such as the SME and State Bodies Group, and indeed through direct discussion as well. We are listening because we share your ambition to create the most advantageous conditions in Ireland for tech startups and scale-ups to succeed. And working together in a spirit of collaboration, I believe that we can achieve something special here in Ireland. A productive startup environment is essential for a sustainable economy. Startups are drivers of employment, of growth and of innovation. And as has been said, if you take your own sector, the technology sector, we know there are currently 2,000 Indigenous startups which are employing around 47,000 people across the country, and that number is growing all the time. Vitality and creativity are often at the heart of many of these startups. It is these qualities that help transform innovative ideas and to put them into practice. This innovation is crucial for productivity and for the growth of our overall economy as well. Innovation can act as the key to unlock a better way of doing things across society, across public services, and indeed across the business community. And to understand this, we just have to look back at the discussion that we've just heard from the panel. The one work undertaken by Niall Toomey and his colleagues at Fernergo helps to improve the customer journey for many financial institutions. Peter Coffinger and teamwork have been providing solutions which help their clients organise their workload in a much more efficient manner. And Neil Sullivan and all at Hatfield Green ensure that companies can gain access to quality expertise in a really tough and challenging HR environment at this time. Government has a vital role to play in supporting the startup environment. A productive startup environment is dependent on many factors, and we've been discussing many of them already, including a culture of entrepreneurship, access to capital, supply of skilled labour, a strong collaborative ecosystem, reduced administrative burdens, and a provision of incentives for innovative startups. And I know that incentives and support schemes need to be straightforward and accessible, and you all have underlined that point this morning, if they are to have the maximum impact. And we are open to improving our offering in that regard, and we'll take on board the specific feedback you've given in relation to a number of schemes, including the shared option scheme, and we'll discuss that across government with colleagues. Enterprise Ireland continues to be a key player, as the Taoiseach has said, in the provision of capital for Indigenous startups. Through the Seed and Venture Capital Scheme, it has to date made commitments to venture funds of over €560 million, and it is the largest venture capital investor in the world by deal count, according to PitchBook's 2020 rankings. In the last budget, I allocated funding to Enterprise Ireland to contribute to a new €90 million Irish Innovation Seed Fund. This will contribute to up to 4 funds with a remit for investing into innovative seed and early stage Irish companies. And with additional private capital, it is reasonable to assume that the overall fund will be much larger than the initial 90 million. It will, of course, help to leverage a much greater amount of private capital. Other government schemes, such as the Disruptive Technologies Innovation Fund, and agencies such as our local enterprise offices are further avenues used to provide capital to the sector. And Microfinance Ireland also has a role in this regard. Shortly, my colleagues, Minister of State Sean Fleming and Minister for Finance Pascal Donoghue, will be publishing the mid-term update of the Finance for Ireland strategy. And this strategy underscores the government's commitment and support for Ireland's growing fintech industry, which has a strong regional footprint as well all over the country. We can all agree that a noticeable characteristic among people operating within the startup sector is their desire and their willingness to network. It is an essential ingredient. Innovation requires an environment that is conducive to networking and collaboration, and that is why the government has supported the rollout of enterprise centres, the regional accelerator scheme, business incubator centres and a campus incubation programme at third level institutions. And I know that this aim of innovation and collaboration is being driven in many spheres, such as the work that both Anne Sheehan and Microsoft and Mary Rogers in the Irish Tech Hub network carry out on a daily basis. The economic recovery plan that we have for our country, published last June, committed to a national clustering policy and enabling network. And this will help to maximise the potential of clustering as a policy tool to deliver national enterprise policy objectives and to support economic recovery, enterprise competitiveness and resilience, and the green and digital transition, which is very much at the heart of Ireland's National Recovery and Resilience Plan, for which we have got funding of almost €1 billion from the European Union. The Commercialisation Fund supports researchers in higher ed institutions and research performing organisations to undertake research for commercialisation. Linking research and business opportunities can lead to innovative and commercially viable products, services and indeed new businesses. The availability of skilled labour is a key requirement for all businesses, and you've all highlighted the challenges that are there at this time. And since coming into government, we have placed a sharp focus on investment in education and training, indeed a lifelong passion of the Taoiseach, as he referred to. And I know you'll be hearing from Minister Harris later. And I do believe that the setting up of the new Department of Further and Higher Ed, Research, Innovation and Science was a strong statement of the priority we attach to the development of a skills base and a knowledge base for the development of a modern economy. My department is currently engaging with Minister Harris and his officials on the long-term funding of this critical sector. In the last budget, I provided €68 million of additional investment in the higher ed sector and a further €34 million for apprenticeships. And we're seeing great progress now in the rollout and the acceleration of our apprenticeship programme. Finally, I am pleased to see Scale Ireland and its members put a keen focus on regional startups, and I want to recognise the work of Jillian Buckley and all at the Western Development Commission for their continued work in promoting regional development. The Economic Recovery Plan re-emphasised the government's commitment to balanced regional development. 9 new regional enterprise plans to 2024 will be launched shortly, and it is at the heart of the National Development Plan, which is our public capital investment programme of €165 billion out to 2030. So enormous opportunities for the regions to develop. These are bottom-up plans developed by regional stakeholders which aim to identify growth opportunities, recognise vulnerabilities and in response strengthen that vital regional enterprise ecosystem to enable job creation in the regions. And I'm pleased to note that in 2021, 68% of new jobs created by Enterprise Ireland clients were outside of Dublin. So to conclude, I believe Ireland is an excellent place to build and scale innovative businesses, and it does have a vibrant spirit of entrepreneurship. Lots of actions are being taken by so many stakeholders to build on and to foster that entrepreneurship. There is access to capital, a collaborative ecosystem, a supply of skilled labour and government supports to help businesses scale. But we must strive to do better, and we've heard that message this morning. In today's world, to stand still is to move backwards, and the government is here to help. I do want to thank all of you in attendance and those who are tuning in this morning for everything that you're doing in terms of creating jobs in our country, developing new enterprises and creating innovative solutions for so many problems that we face across society. And I want to finally acknowledge once again Scale Ireland for all your work and for the invitation to be part of this really great event this morning. Look forward to studying the survey that you've published today and to continuing to work with you in a spirit of collaboration as we work towards meeting our shared objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Taoiseach. Thank you, Anne. There are so many things that I'd like to pick up on from this conversation, but I'm just going to mention 2 things very quickly. Firstly, we very strongly welcome the Innovation Equity Fund, the new 90 million fund of funds. The the financing crunch is most acute at the early stage, and so it's very important that we target this early stage. The other thing that I wanted to mention is the aspect of startups not having historically been part of the national conversation and not really having had a voice in the national conversation. Hopefully, Scale Ireland is giving startups that voice. And ultimately, perhaps we might even have a minister for startups, and that would make sure that it was indeed debated in the Dáil. So thank you again, Taoiseach.
Could I just say one final comment? I was struck when we all talk about third level and so on. I was in Enterprise, and I remember saying to Frank Ryan, who was then the CEO, the Stripe brothers, right? They took off from Leaving Cert Young Scientists, and had gone to EI, and who thought they were too young. Yes. And look what happened, you know. So we need to think about that too, you know. The 16, 17, 18-year-olds are coming up with brilliant stuff, you know. And the young scientists, I go to it every year for the last 20 years. You're just blown away by the kind of creativity and the ideas that all nascent businesses ready to start. Anyway.
Absolutely incredible. So our next panel is going to discuss promoting diverse and impactful entrepreneurship around the country with leading founders and experts. First, though, please take a look at this short video with regional entrepreneurs. It's an opportunity to have a very quick cup of tea and join us in a few minutes for our next panel discussion on this very important topic.
Hi, my name is Claire Meskel. I'm the founder of Teletherapy. Teletherapy is a platform that allows patients with Parkinson's receive voice therapy from home, and it allows, from a clinician's end, them to monitor their patient's progress remotely.
My name is Stephen Ryan. I'm founder of Narration, a marketing agency that covers consultancy, training and content creation in Cork.
Hi, I'm Frank Brennan. I'm the CEO of Republic of Work in Cork in South Mall. I run a co-working space and innovation hub in 12 South Mall. We've been here since 2016 and we're celebrating our 5th year in business in April.
My name is John Reardon and I'm the chairman of Grow Remote, which is an organisation that enables and empowers people, companies and communities to embrace and adopt remote work in a way that's going to catapult us forward.
Hi, my name is Emmett. I am the founder of Control.io. It's a software for sales managers that helps them develop their teams and improve their overall sales team performance by managing their coaching activities.
My name is Gráinne O'Keefe. I'm the CEO of the Ludgate Hub, which is Ireland's first rural digital hub located in Skibbereen, West Cork. We're open since 2015 and I suppose, like I mentioned, being the first rural hub, we were piloting that particular initiative and we were able to showcase the success that it can bring to a local rural region such that other areas can now replicate.
I think great ideas and great businesses are not limited to one region. So I think especially in Cork, it has been really important for me and it's important to support all startups regardless of region.
It's essential to grow startups in this community. Without the startups, we have no future. I mean, it's an exciting time to live in Cork at the moment. Lots of new and exciting businesses opening up.
It's hugely important to help these startups. We've been doing so for the last nearly 5 years, helping companies come in, grow, scale their businesses. I mean, startups are the next generation that are going to help support the Cork economy. We've seen so many startups come out of the space over the last years, coming in with some small ideas and growing them into global businesses.
Local and regional startups are the lifeblood of the Irish economy. They always have been. The preponderance of business in Ireland is small and local. And while in the past we have really focused on large multinationals and a lot of FDI, truly what's going to help us to spread a lot more of the wealth and redistribute the wealth is by focusing on local and regional startups. So it's a very important area for us.
People tend to kind of forget or negate the impact of startups in terms of job creation. There's a lot of startups out there that are creating a lot of jobs and doing a lot of good things. And I think if we kind of focus a little bit more on those, we might reduce our need or dependence on other areas of the economy to create jobs.
I feel very passionately about regional startups. I think the talent to be found across the country of Ireland is extraordinary. We're a highly educated country. Our educational system is very strong, and by focusing and concentrating on the regionalisation of that talent and untapping the potential there, I think it's crucial to our success as an island of innovation.
I think the ecosystem in Cork is small but very strong. I have had great support from the Ignite programme in UCC, Local Enterprise Office and Republic of Work, and the fact that the NDRC has linked with regional offices has been a huge support for us.
The network of supports in the regions and locally and in regions is actually quite good. But if we're to become the best, if we're to become the epicenter of all aspects of remote work in Europe and worldwide, there's a lot more work for us to do.
We're very lucky here in Cork with the amount of supports that we have to help businesses grow and scale. We're doing it for the last number of years. We run a number of programs internally here in Republic of Work. We've partnered with the likes of teamwork.com, and we run a Teamwork Catalyst SaaS specific incubator program, where we're actually the home of 16 companies to date, all growing in the SaaS space. We're very lucky we're around the corner from the local enterprise office, both city and in county. We've got supports with the likes of the MTU campus, UCC, we've got the IT at Cork, and again the Cork Chamber, which is just up the hill from us here with over 14,000 members here in Cork.
I think the supports are getting better. I don't think we're there yet as a fully fledged out supportive environment for nurturing startups and entrepreneurship. So it's encouraging, the indicators are encouraging, but I think we have room to grow.
Hi everybody and welcome back to the Regional Startup Summit. I have a fantastic panel to get you through to today. We're talking today about supporting impactful and diverse entrepreneurship around the country. My name is Gráinne Dwyer. I am CEO and co-founder of Heritage, formerly Story Creative, and I'm also European Innovation Council Ambassador. So if any startups are watching today, please contact me about European supports that can help your business scale in Europe. I'm going to start off today with someone who I know, her business, Dr. Fiona Edwards-Murphy and Isilt Ward. Dr. Fiona Edwards-Murphy is co-founder of Apris Protect. And Fiona, we know from the Scale Ireland survey that, shockingly enough, about 50%, 46% of founders said that they didn't have a female CEO, C-level executive or senior manager as part of their organisation. What would be maybe your response to that, or maybe can you just dive into how you've led your company as a female co-founder?
Sure. Hi, Gráinne. Thanks so much for having me on. I think I was actually surprised at how high that number was, almost. I mean, I think normally surveys would ask, do you have a female CEO? And I know the number goes way, way down when you're looking for companies with female CEOs. So it's nice to see that there is probably more female talent there than I thought there was, just when you're at all the C levels rather than just the CEO. So that is nice. And I think that certainly what I think helped me a lot in starting out my entrepreneurial journey was being encouraged to at least explore entrepreneurship when I was at the university stage. So I know that there's another panel on student entrepreneurs and young entrepreneurs, so that's great, and they'll probably get more into that. But certainly being based in UCC and seeing the Ignite program and seeing my even my own peers from my own graduating class going and starting their own startups. By the time I was finished my PhD, the whole idea of starting a company was not alien to me at all. So I think that was certainly a major part, because yeah, it's certainly not the standard career path for people. And I think certainly women, and particularly women in STEM, I think you're kind of thinking by the time you're finished your degree, or by the time you're finished your master's or your PhD, you fought so hard to be there, you fought so hard to stick around in an area where you're really underrepresented. There's a big call there to just go get a proper job or a normal job and just say, right, that's it, I've won. I'm not going to go on a further adventure beyond that. So I think that certainly having this path laid out for me beforehand was very advantageous.
And what helped you, Fiona, along that path? Who were your mentors, or what challenges did you face, and how did you overcome them?
I'm sorry, the connection's a little bit dodgy. I didn't hear that question.
Maybe, Fiona, just tell us the challenges that you faced and how you did overcome them on that path.
Oh, sure. Great. So I think it's kind of difficult to think about the challenges. It feels like it was so long ago now. It was just 5 years ago. I think for me, what I had starting APIS Protect was I had a really clear idea of the technology and how the technology would work. I had a really clear idea about what my customers were doing and the problem that we were going to solve for them. But what really terrified me was I guess the more mundane side of starting a business, as in, how do I actually file documents with the CRO? What kind of accounting do I have to do? How do I hire an employee? How does the contract work? What is HR? I had never had a career in industry or anything like that. I was coming straight out of academia into being the lead in a startup. So that was certainly very intimidating for me. And what was really supportive, what helped me an awful lot in overcoming that was being part of the Ignite program at UCC. So that kind of natural path out of college and into the startup world, bringing in different people to help us with those mundane but still very terrifying when you don't know what they are or how to do them topics, and then creating a nice little kind of support system of other people who are facing the same challenges as you. And I think that throughout the whole process of APIS Protect, like that, it started out with Ignite at the very early stages. Then I was part of the Innovate program in Dublin BIC, and then the Founders Forum through Enterprise Ireland, like that, having a strong network of other people who have overcome the challenges that you're facing and other people who are currently dealing with the same problems as you, almost just kind of as a support system, and even just to be able to ring each other and give out about problems and not solve them.
Super important.
Really helpful.
Super important.
Yeah.
Gordon, move on to you. You are the co-founder and CEO of Food Cloud, and you've been trading since, is it 2013? So a while now, a household name, just like Fiona in the entrepreneurship community. Could you tell us maybe any challenges that you have faced, either fundraising or perceptions at board level in terms of you as a female co-founder?
Sorry, could you just repeat the end of that?
Yeah, so what are the challenges that you face, maybe either fundraising for your company, or is there any kind of explanation or examples of any challenges that you faced as a female co-founder?
Quite similar to Fiona's experience as well. I started Food Cloud with another female co-founder, Eva O'Brien, when we were in university, and I'm quite young as well. I was just in my undergrad, so around 21 at the time. And it meant that, you know, you didn't have much credibility, you didn't have much experience, and no network either. So being able to access supports initially in Trinity through like it's the Launchbox Accelerator Programme, Social Entrepreneurs Ireland, NDRC, all of those programs at an early stage were incredibly important. One, they gave you a bit of credibility because they were recognized brands and people recognized the process that you went through to actually get into an accelerator or into one of those programs. So that really helped. But largely as well, one of the benefits was that network. And, you know, entrepreneurship can seem like it's going to be a lonely journey. It was one of the concerns that I had at the very start of the journey. And even a few months in, I had a completely opposite experience. You know, the network that we had grew exponentially from day one. And it's why things like Scale Ireland are so important. We need to connect and we need to support each other, and we need those programs so that you can access the experience and the skills that you might not have, that you need to set up the company and solve the problem that you're setting out to solve. From a fundraising point of view, we're a non-profit social enterprise, so we do rely a lot on our kind of earned revenue income, and then on the likes of corporate partnerships, philanthropy. So we've quite a few different income streams, and I think, you know, every organisation, I presume, mostly will say it's a challenge, especially when you're starting out. It has gotten easier in the last few years because we've got a proven solution. You know, we're delivering impact on a daily basis, and you can see that, and you can see the numbers. So it has definitely gotten easier, which has been really important for us to actually enable us to grow. But in the earlier days, you do heavily rely on the network that you have, on the different programs that you can access to really get yourself up off the ground.
And do you think since inception in 2013, you've seen massive improvements, or what do you think you've seen for maybe female entrepreneurs in Ireland?
Oh yeah, huge difference. Even just in terms of entrepreneurship, I would say, you know, when I went into university, it's the last thing that I studied business and economics, and I would never have considered myself going down a path of entrepreneurship because I didn't really understand what it was. You know, I just kind of imagined it as more of having your own shop, and it sounded kind of scary and a bit lonely. So it was definitely not something that I set out to do. And, you know, having that exposure in Trinity, particularly in my final year, was when Launchbox was set up, and hearing about other entrepreneurs was incredibly important to actually give you the confidence and the understanding of what you were setting out on. And I think that has really accelerated in the last number of years. You know, there's a lot more programs and events and discussion around startups and what it is to be an entrepreneur in Ireland and what supports are out there. So I think, you know, I'm still involved in these programs in Trinity, and I've completely seen more female founders applying. Not enough. There's still a lot of work to do, but there's definitely an increase in the amount of students that are interested in and accessing entrepreneurship as a real career path.
Yeah, I think it's just the visibility, as you said, and if you can't see, you can't be. Parsa, moving on to you, you're the CEO and co-founder of Alien, and you have up to, is it 40 staff now? Are they worldwide? Where are they? And my question for you is, with big hitting clients like Wells Fargo, Revolut, how important for you is cultural diversity within your organisation, and can you maybe accredit that to the success of your growth?
Absolutely, Gonia. Good morning. So, as you said, we're close to 40 people in Alien, and we are lucky to have people from about, I think, 12 or 13 different countries and nationalities, which obviously enrich our culture with their own cultures and, things they've seen and things they've done, I suppose, previously. In terms of the importance of cultural diversity, in terms, by bringing new ideas to the table. Again, as I mentioned, since COVID, we've started recruiting talent from abroad a bit more kind of prominently, and so currently we have staff who are physically not present in Ireland. Most of our team are based in Ireland, but again, when it comes to I suppose bringing new ideas to the table, I'm originally from Iran. I moved to Ireland back in 2012 through the Startup Entrepreneurship Program, which kind of gives entrepreneurs, foreign entrepreneurs, sort of a visa to kind of relocate to Ireland, set up their companies here, and So that was an incredible start or incredible opportunity for me personally. But then afterwards, I brought my initial team members actually from Iran, a couple of really talented, skilled engineers who stayed with Alien for a number of years and then went on to, I suppose, other companies in Ireland and kind of helped, I suppose, enrich their cultures, build better products, etc. So I suppose one thing that I wanted to mention is for foreign entrepreneurs like myself moving to Ireland, before we get to the stage where we face all the typical sort of startup challenges like funding, recruitment, retention, etc., there is definitely this adaptation phase. So with the startup entrepreneurship visa, you're kind of a little bit left on your own after you arrive in Ireland. In our case, we were lucky. We had SOSV already as an investor who really helped us kind of set up an entity and get an office space, etc. But I think there's perhaps a bit of a missing link, in this kind of in this one sort of specific process again for attracting foreign entrepreneurs to Ireland. Which, with the likes of NDRC, etc., I wish, we could have sort of gone maybe straight into a program like NDRC after moving to Ireland in terms of getting that initial mentorship. And again, you're in a new country, new culture. It takes a couple of years to kind of just adapt to the environment. And then you sort of get to the starting line that, other companies, other startups, like maybe indigenous startups would be starting from. So that's kind of perhaps my perspective as a foreign entrepreneur in Ireland.
That's what Ireland does really well, isn't it? The brand of Ireland and come to Ireland. But you're saying it's the next part is where we kind of need to improve, is it?
Exactly. So from the time, I think it's just one of those things. It might be as simple as, just connecting the two dots, in terms of, again, we have a great visa for foreign entrepreneurs. It's really, it's very competitive on a global scale, the startup visa program that we have in Ireland compared to most, sort of the vast majority of Western countries. So it's really easy to get here as a foreign entrepreneur. Then obviously there's Enterprise Ireland with various support schemes. But again, there's that initial gap, I think, between when you apply for that visa, arrive in Ireland, and you want to establish a business, access mentorship, have office space, access funding, etc. That could potentially be improved.
100%. Bill, I'm going to move on to you. You're a general partner in SOSV and a co-founder of one of my favourite companies, actually, WeForest. So I love it. My background is in sustainability, so I followed that company for years. Bill, maybe explain what SOSV do in terms of diversity and maybe even some personal things that you do in terms of you have rules about going on panels and things like that.
Yeah, sure. Well, look, that's an easy one. There's actually a Panelist Pledge that I signed many years ago that you can sign up for it. I don't have a link, but it's fine. It's easy to find. And when you sign that pledge, you basically say that you will not go onto a panel if it's all white men. You just won't do it. And if there is not a woman on there, if there's no diversity, at whatever stage, you'll just say, no, sorry, can't do it. And I've done it several times. And actually, each time people have gone, oh my goodness, you're right. And they've actually changed the panel, which is fantastic. When you're a venture capital investor, and in fact, any investor, you need to be discriminating without discrimination. And it's a subtle point. Talent is actually pretty rare. Like the kind of talent like passer, you don't meet not everyone is a passer. So you have to be discriminating about who you invest in. You've got to actually look at, okay, I've got to find that talent that can get stuff done. I mean, the word entrepreneur means doer, and you need people with that bias for action that also have the skills and the technical skills often to build stuff. I mean, that's why we built Coda Dojo, was because we wanted more kids to get those technical skills to build stuff. So you want to be filtering out the people that don't have what it takes. At the same time, because talent is so rare, it is a complete blunder to have discrimination against any group, people, gender, age. These are all things that don't matter. That if you have that discrimination, you cut your investment away. You reduce the population that you can actually look at for that amazing talent. Even in these times, I see examples of female founders who don't get funded because they're told, oh, they need a man as CEO. I've heard those exact words fed back to me because, we're not lead investors generally. We just do lots and lots of accelerators, and we then follow on our investments. So we co-invest with lots of investors. So we get to hear from the founders what their experience was with thousands of other investors. And even to this day, I hear stories like that. And you're like, that's crazy. It is manifestly crazy. Why would you have discrimination against any group where you might find that rare and precious thing, incredible talent? And so, we have a very much different policy. I mean, we just look for exciting stuff that's actually getting traction because it's doing stuff. And we look to back that. In our accelerators, we are the first investor. And so we are constantly, inviting incredibly diverse teams from all over the world into our accelerators. We're constantly looking at them saying, well, do they have something? Have they built a prototype? Have they taken action? We just don't care about all the things that you just are meaningless in terms of actually making progress, like gender, like age, like race, like religion, like color, like any of those things are just not useful indicators of success.
And from the portfolio of SOSV, it makes business sense that we have diverse teams coming forward. Is there any examples from your portfolio that you've seen that?
I can give you tons, but an example would be Jenica, Muslim Indian woman founder who happens to be a complete genius, has developed a molecular key that can deliver drugs or gene therapies into any living cell without toxicity, without immunogenicity. And guess what? She has a lab and office in Cork, right? That was never going to happen unless someone like us took her onto the accelerator program. Or you look at Miranda Wong and Jenny Yao at Novaloop in Silicon Valley. Again, came to Ireland, went through the accelerator, went back to the Valley. They have completely revolutionized the recycling of unrecyclable plastic. These are teams of people who have an absolute passion that were denied entry into a lot of other investment programs because of their gender, because of their age, because of their ethnicity. They just found it really hard. And, once they got that first start, they have been incredible at raising money, at putting together facilities, at making progress. It is, in my experience, an absolute boon to have diversity. I actually think of diversity as resilience.
Bill, that's a nice segue into Andrew Mcadam, who is the Global Field Director at Microsoft for Startups. And Andrew, we had an interesting chat during the week about maybe something what Bill is mentioning there about discrimination or active discrimination. And maybe can you tell us a small bit about what Microsoft are doing in terms of diversity within their programs? And we had a great chat about that diversity comes in different norms. It's not just gender. It can be socioeconomic, it can be neurodiverse. So you might just tell us a small bit about what your team at Microsoft are doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks so much for the opportunity to be on this panel as well. I mean, I'm delighted to see both Fiona and Isolde on the panel as well, since we've been incredibly fortunate to have a tiny part in some of what they're doing at the moment. And what I would say is, the Microsoft for Startups program that I'm responsible for, we've been through quite a few changes over the last couple of years, and that you're making, I think, really resonate. We heard even earlier on, and was talking about culturally mainstreaming startups, but I think there's another step that we need to take specifically when it comes to diversity and inclusion. We need to actually start culturally mainstreaming this kind of conversation. So one of the key things that we've been looking at recently is actually changing the program, adapting the program. Before, we had a very clear focus. We aligned it very closely with where we believed Microsoft as an organization added value. It was about connecting B2B startups. But what we've now realized is our real opportunity at the moment is to actually democratize access to programs like the ones that we're running. Actually actively go out there, not just reactively engaging with startups, but proactively engaging with startups. And from my perspective, there's so much information out there at the moment about the importance of inclusion. I was very lucky to be part of the Diversity and Inclusion Council here in Microsoft Ireland over the last few years. And one of the key things that we were talking about before, Gráinne, was around neurodiversity and the opportunity within the tech space to actually bring neurodiversity even more to the forefront, because in neurodiversity, there's a real superpower in neurodiversity. When we talk about ADHD, sometimes people actually conflate that with a lack of focus, whereas it's actually a super focus. It's this incredible ability to really focus down in specific topics. And it's the same when it comes to elements of autism and dyspraxia as well. So one of the things we actually did was we ran a recruitment strategy specifically designed to allow neurodiverse candidates to thrive in a recruitment.
Oh, I think we're losing a small bit there, Andrew. Can you hear us?
Sorry, no, I lost you for a
Yeah. Andrew, I might just pause you there and just while we're getting your connection back and move on quickly to Jean. Jean, you are the Deputy Chair of Women in Tech and Science. And listening to Fiona and Isel there, it's about visibility, it's about mentorship. Is there anything from your role that you think we can do to improve diversity in the entrepreneurship landscape?
Sorry, the line is terrible. Would you mind just repeating that again?
We've just heard there, Jean, from Fiona and Isel that it is about visibility and mentorship. Is that something that you've seen in your role? No?
No. Do you want to try again?
Sorry, Jean, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yeah.
Great. Jean, maybe tell us a small bit about your role as Deputy Chair of the Women in Tech and Science in Ireland and what you think can be done for diversity and entrepreneurship.
Great. Yeah, of course, I'd be happy to. And thank you very much for having me here. It's been great to listen to the panel and very inspiring this morning. So Women in Technology and Science Ireland is a voluntary organisation that's set up to promote the participation of, so the attraction, the retention and the active participation of women into STEM careers in Ireland. And essentially, we look at all stages of that talent pipeline, but specifically with a focus maybe from third level through then what we call the leaky pipeline in the career, because we understand that there are fewer girls making choices to take up STEM courses into college than when they go into third level education. They may complete their STEM course but may choose to move into a non-STEM career, and then when they enter the workplace there's the glass ceiling, of course, but there's also the possibility that after a certain amount of time they'll pivot and move into a non-STEM career. So we're very interested in understanding the reasons why that happens, and then working with the third levels and our partner companies to try and retain women in the talent pipeline. And what I'm listening to, particularly from Fiona and Isos this morning, it's really interesting because their perspective is coming from, a startup perspective and that of being an entrepreneur. But what they're talking about, we see at all levels throughout the work that we do, and fundamental to the success of women. But I think all maybe minorities within STEM is mentoring and role models, because as you said yourself earlier, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So if you're trying to find your way onto an entrepreneurship program, or to take an idea that you have and grow it into something that can help change the world, which is fundamentally what we're trying to do here, if you don't have any idea where to go or how to navigate your way into that community, then it's very, very challenging. So I think it's really important to, first of all, set those role models and those fantastic female role models like Fiona and Isolt out as ambassadors to maybe women and who are interested in starting their own company, to girls who are in third level and thinking, you know, I don't know what I can do with this. And then to girls that are earlier in the pipeline and thinking about, you know, they have some great ideas around sustainability, around changing the world. I have a 12-year-old, and, you know, the world better watch out with the ideas that she has. So, you know, holding these women up as being the inspirations. But then when we bring women into the pipeline, creating an environment where they have a network, that they're nurtured, and they have support systems where they can go, whether it's as a sounding board or somebody that they just want to have, you know, if when they're having that moment where they think they're the only CEO in the world, who do they talk to, because nobody else has that experience with them, or if it's somebody to guide them, somebody who has been there before, somebody who can kind of lend a helping hand to show them the way, to keep them in that pipeline. I think that's those are really important. But what strikes me, as I mentioned, is that when we talk to groups that are working with teenage girls in schools or girls in universities, women in industry, that mentoring and role model piece is so important, irrespective of the part of the pipeline that you're in.
Thank you so much, Jean. And what I'm going to do at the end of this session is just ask quickly a few pieces of advice from the panelists. Andrew, I might just jump back to you if your line is good again. And you were just mentioning there about the steps that Microsoft are taking and around the area of neurodiverse hiring. Could you maybe just dip into that again for us if you can?
Yeah, absolutely. But I'd love to pick up on what Jean was just talking about as well, because it's something when it comes to mentoring and role modeling, one of the things, and forgive me, I think the connection went down briefly. And we were talking about moving from reactive to proactive engagement. And Jean, everything you were just talking about with regards to that role modeling, one of the key things that we're looking at doing at the moment, I work with so many investors, we work with accelerators, incubators, and I hear all the time that they don't discriminate. We don't discriminate against anyone, but there's a massive difference between not discriminating and proactively actually engaging these audiences. So I'm delighted to hear exactly the kind of thing with a 14-year-old daughter myself, with what I see the future being. She's part of the Koala in Wicklow, incredibly active out there. And what we need to have, we really need to demonstrate more role models. So one of the key things we're looking at in the Microsoft for Startups program is the Microsoft Mentor platform. We've got over 1,000 internal Microsoft employees at the moment starting to engage with startups. And what I'm now doing is working with the ERGs, Women in Cloud, our Gleam Society, to actually have role models that people can identify with, be it ethnicity, be it gender, and back to your question, Grania, on neurodiversity as well. So from an accessibility perspective, one of the key things that we looked at was how can we, from a neurodiverse perspective, create an environment to allow them to excel during an interview process. So I was very fortunate to be involved in a process where we enabled them, rather than having the classic interview, quick talk, prove yourself in a very short period of time, we actually did it over a period of a week, giving them an environment that they could thrive in to really be able to demonstrate the skills, the competencies and capabilities that they were able to bring. And I was delighted to see the impact of that, of recruiting more neurodiverse candidates into the Microsoft Island. And
you were discussing with me during the weekend a fantastic book. I had a quick glance at it there today as well, but it's probably next to you there. It does make business sense. There is actual stats behind diverse-led entrepreneurs, and that they do better.
Oh, it's amazing. Perrine Fark, who's based out of the UK, but we've had a talk on a number of panels over the last couple of years, and she's written a book, and it's fantastic because it's not just, there are so many books out there about the theory behind it, but what she also does is actually highlights quite a number of things that you can apply in any business. But there were two things that I always call out. Number one, 2 reports done, one by Deloitte, one by PwC, inclusive organizations are twice as likely to exceed financial targets, and 85% of CEOs whose companies have inclusive strategy said it's improved their bottom line. And since we're talking about innovation, the other thing I love to highlight is Boston Consulting Group surveyed 1,700 companies. And as part of that, what they found was there was diverse management teams were significantly more prolific when it came to accelerating innovation, because they bring that, not only innovation, but also business opportunities as well, due to that diversity of perspective and being able to look at different markets. And I think, if you didn't need any other reason, those two alone are fantastic reasons to really include diversity into your profiling.
While we have this well of knowledge in front of us, I would love to ask you just 60 seconds of what you would tell the entrepreneurship community to do to embody diversity and why it makes sense within their communities. For my industry, I work in the creative agency space. I was telling Andrew during the week that only 0.1% of creative agencies are owned by women, which is insane. So what we do is we actively crew 50% of our crews as female-led crews. The industry standard is 22%. And this year, we're giving and disclosing the carbon impact of those productions for our clients so they can make active choices on what type of productions they want to do with us as well. Maybe jumping back to Bill, what kind of 60-second piece of advice would you give to startups out there or the entrepreneurship community in terms of why diversity is important in their organizations and where to look for it?
So unless entrepreneurship is really hard. And unless you have different viewpoints, you're not going to be able to conduct all the experiments you need to do to actually find something that works. And a lot of the challenges that we have today are even harder than they were, because it's not just enough these days, in my view, to start a business that's just going to make money. You need to have a business that's actually solving a problem. And the biggest opportunity for problem solving we have in the world today is sustainability in the environment. And those problems don't yield to traditional thinking. They don't yield to reductionist thinking. They yield to incredible bouts of creativity. And if you don't have a very diverse group of minds and bodies going into that problem, it's very unlikely that you're going to find a solution that is going to really address the problem and scale. And the opportunity of solving this global crisis of the environment is the largest commercial opportunity I have ever seen. I mean, we have a Climate Tech 100. There's a huge number of diverse founders. I mentioned Miranda and Jenny. They are taking the most unrecyclable plastic and upcycling it, turning it into precursors to make new, fresh stuff. That is an incredible innovation, but they wouldn't have been able to achieve it without an incredibly diverse team.
100%. Thank you so much, Bill. Parsa, how about yourself? What kind of 30, 60-second pitch would you give to entrepreneurs out there of why diversity is important in their organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to kind of touch on what Bill was saying there, it's all about cognitive diversity at the end of the day and bringing new ideas to the table. Often that's correlates with people's backgrounds and where they come from. And I think if you have a robust process in place in terms of which ideas win and how to assess ideas and how to nurture creativity, I think bringing as much diversity into every decision really at any company will be absolutely a net positive sort of improvement. So yeah, I mean, again, I think it all comes down to cognitive diversity and then having sort of a process around which again results in best ideas winning. And I think that's a very powerful combination at any company, I think, in any team.
Thank you, Parsa. And Fiona, what about yourself? How would you tell female founders to be seen? What advice would you give?
That's great. Yeah, I think I'd have to echo absolutely what Parsa was saying there. What I found one of our biggest strengths at Apes Protect is the diversity of our own team, the diversity of, not just gender and life experience, but also just knowledge and unexpected ways that people's life experiences has helped them to solve the problems that we have. Like, you know, we've got data scientists who speak Spanish, who suddenly them speaking Spanish is the most valuable thing today for me. And then also as a female founder, and particularly when it comes to fundraising and you know, finding even large customers at the early stages, looking for diversity on the other side of the table is really important. People talk an awful lot about how women or, you know, diverse teams struggle an awful lot to find funding, and I don't feel like that's been our experience. But what I think has prevented that is looking always for investors who not necessarily reflect us and have the same diversity as us, but are diverse teams, are inclusive teams, because then you know that the people who you're going on this journey with have the same mentality as you. Because if you've just got an investor that's a group of straight white men, then, you know, ultimately they're not reflecting your own diversity, and that's just going to cause problems down the line, even if you do manage to get money.
Exactly. Jean, what about yourself? What can organisations do to embody those role model types that you discussed for maybe emerging entrepreneurs and, as I said, create visibility for diverse entrepreneurship teams?
Well, I suppose that the first question that I would have for any organisation and any startup is, what's the cost of not being diverse?
Exactly.
You know, are you building bias into your products because you don't have a diverse development team? You know, where's the unseen cost by not having a diverse group of people around you thinking differently? And I love the piece that Fiona said there about, like, the unexpected thing that the piece that you didn't even really know about somebody suddenly becoming the most valuable thing about them. But I think that that would be the question: what's the cost of not being diverse? And I think if you approach it from that perspective, suddenly the value of diversity becomes very apparent to you. And in terms of role models, I think one thing that I would say is that everybody, maybe to some extent, suffers from imposter syndrome, but women would say that they maybe, or the research would say that maybe perhaps women suffer from it more. And if you are in a room where there is, you know, somebody that you think is a fantastic role model, is exemplifying the behaviours that you would like to show and elevate, I think giving that person a nudge to step forward and to be seen and have their voice heard, I think that's very, very valuable, because you know, sometimes we can be slow to push ourselves, but if you can help somebody else forward to become the role model you know they can be, I think that has a knock-on benefit for the person, for the people around them, and for future generations.
So listeners out there, give a nudge today if you can. Andrew, final 30 seconds before I wrap up this panel. What's your words of wisdom?
Well, before I go, Isolde, I don't know, has she had the opportunity herself?
I can't see Isolde on the screen. Was she here? Oh, sorry, you're not on my screen there. Isolde, can you just jump in there quickly just with your words of wisdom, and then I'll just have to wrap up the panel then.
Yeah, so you know, definitely would agree and echo with a lot of what was said, especially around the importance of diversity in terms of decision making, different points of view, and even really positively contributing to the culture of the organisation. For us, in addition, it's important because for our solution to be effective, we rely on a huge diversity of partnerships, and all of those partners working together. So, you know, from a very small, fully volunteer-led community organisation to a large national charity to multinational retailers to a family-run food business, to the range of partners that we work with across government and other organisations. If we didn't also reflect that level of diversity in our own organisation, we wouldn't be very effective at working with those partners too. And I think when we're looking at solving problems like the climate crisis, they're going to involve participation across all of society, not just in the business community, but also in the community and voluntary sector. And I think for all of us to work very effectively, we'll need to see that diversity within organisations 100%. As well. So it definitely has been an incredibly important part of Food Cloud's success and our ability to engage with our partners, that we try our best to also reflect that diversity internally.
Thank you so much. Andrew, last 10 seconds even now, if you can.
You're very kind. But it was important that we had this.
You did.
It was great. Thank you. Look, I'm just going to say the same thing again. I've lived in Ireland 20 years. The thing I love about this country, and Anne said it earlier, brilliant at driving change. Let's move from being reactive to proactively being intentional about the opportunity that inclusion enables in our organizations. And if you don't know how to do it, the great news is there's loads of people out there that can help you do it.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to all of our panelists. That is our panel wrapped. Please continue the conversation at Scale Ireland Summit hashtag on social. You'll have a quick video, and then we're on to the next panel about supporting entrepreneurship in students and the third level. So stay with us, please.
I'm Donny Kiernan. I'm the founder and CEO of Tonego Partnering and Tonego Academy. Tonego Partnering, operating since 2008, we deliver consulting and service execution in building partner programs and partner networks for technology companies.
Hi, my name is Fiona Ryan. I'm the Startup and Entrepreneurship Manager with the Ludgate Hub in Skibbereen, beautiful West Cork.
Hi everybody, my name is Dean Cunningham. I'm a solicitor and I am the principal of Cunningham Solicitors. Cunningham Solicitors is a law firm, essentially a commercial law firm with an IP and a technology law focus, with a huge emphasis on assisting startups navigate their legal challenges.
And my name is Paul O'Shea and I'm the founder of Peckish. We help restaurants market the right dish at the right customer based on their personal preferences or their dietary requirements through a menu search engine where they can find exactly what they're looking for from multiple online ordering platforms.
It's highly important to have a vibrant startup community because the energy created by new founders and new startups coming in, creating new innovations, looking at the world and technologies in particular in a different way, is effectively creating an energy and new aspirations for existing businesses in the ecosystem.
It's really important to grow startups and entrepreneurs and sole traders in our community. We need to solve for many, not just one, because we operate in a community where there are many different types of businesses, whether they be tech, food and beverage, retail, customer services, and so on and so forth.
Well, startups, of course, are the lifeblood of any vibrant economy. I work with a huge amount of startups myself, and I've seen firsthand what a difference supporting startups can make to people's lives.
So I think it's vital to assist entrepreneurs and startups at a grassroots level, because you can find out kind of like what supports are out there, who's been through it already, and who can help you build, fund and scale your startup.
You have the incubation and accelerator programs, and we've got many of them in the region, and some of those supported through the colleges. But then you have the informal network of the experienced business people that are very keen to help in offering their experience and mentoring services, but also there's a vibrant investment community, the angel network, and so on.
Local Enterprise Office operate as well from the Ludgate Hub at times. They offer their business advice clinics. So anything that we do is in partnership with the Local Enterprise Office in terms of those supports, and we see it as a natural fit.
The supports in Cork are fantastic. We've been lucky enough to be supported by a lot of them through our journey. So at a student level, you've got Student Inc. in MTU, you've got Ignite in UCC, you've also got the Local Enterprise Office, you've got New Frontiers, you've got Republic of Work here with like the Teamwork Catalyst and the NDRC Pre-Accelerator, and that's just to name a few.
Thank you, Martina and Brian and all at Scale Ireland for an excellent summit so far. And thanks also to Microsoft for Startups at Microsoft Ireland, Atlantic Bridge, Hatfield Green and Republic of Work for supporting our summit. My name is John Breslin. I'm a Professor of Electronic Engineering at NUI Galway, where I'm Director of our Masters in Agri and Tech Innovation and Entrepreneurship. And I'm also a researcher with the Insight, Confirm and Vista Milk SFI Research Centres. I'm delighted to chair this final panel on supporting student entrepreneurs and startups at third level. But before we start the panel, we're going to have an address in this final session from Simon Harris TD, who is the Minister for Further and Higher Education, Research, Innovation and Science. Thank you, Minister, for joining us today for this panel.
Thank you very much. Well, thanks so much, John, and it's great to be here with you, and it's great to see so many colleagues and friends and partners who are going to be joining in this conversation. And it's brilliant to see the ecosystem that is Cork's third level sector represented here, and looking forward to hearing all of the contributions. I really want to thank Scale Ireland for all of the work in organising this brilliant summit. I think it couldn't be more timely, because as we're beginning to dare to lift our heads again and dare to look to the future again and to plan as to how we live in a world where COVID exists, but in a world where we get our economy and our society back on track, I think it's so important that we begin to probe and question and ask each other, what role can we as a sector constructively play? And I know as Minister with responsibility for the third level sector and for research and science, you will find so many willing partners wanting to help startups do well in our country, but also wanting to help provide a pipeline when it comes to talent and when it comes to graduates with entrepreneurial skills embedded in all that they learn. Indeed, I've just had an opportunity to speak into secondary schools, where I've spoken to sixth year students. And a message I'm really trying to land is that we need to broaden the conversations about all of the options that are available to young people in this country in terms of career pathways. We have a great tradition in this country of a really good education system, but we have work to do to embed the idea that I too can be an entrepreneur. We tend to produce really, really good employees, really well qualified employees. We need to help people take that leap, and that requires a cultural change, and that cultural change cannot start too early in the education system. I know our Taoiseach addressed you earlier and made it very clear that the government wishes to and is determined to provide startups with support, but not just support for all startups, but actually provide startups support with a specific regional focus. And I want to touch on some of those points today, because I think there is an opportunity now to press reset perhaps and create a renewed economic and social vision and agenda for our country. And you cannot create or advance that agenda without recognising that at its very heart is going to have to be higher education, and is going to have to be a higher education system based on a renewed focus on research, innovation and entrepreneurship. We now have a dedicated department in this country working on further and higher education, research, innovation and science. We now have a focus on issues that in the past perhaps didn't receive the priority that they deserved or required. And I am really pleased that in the first 18 months of our department to be able to speak at a regional summit, and a summit focusing on supporting the regions, to be able to outline to you the progress we're making in terms of bringing higher education into all regions in our country through the rollout of our technological university agenda. It is very clear, though, that we live in a world where there is real pressure and competition when it comes to talent, and this country must be prepared to fight its corner and protect its flank. My vision is to see this country become an innovation island, with my department providing direction on strategy, funding and structural reform for research and innovation, and for regional and national linkage with enterprise, in particular with SMEs. We need to become an island of talent, unleashing the contribution of higher education and further education to human capital and lifelong learning. And we need to become an international island, promoting Ireland as a leader in higher education and research. Our universities, I'm delighted to say, are interested and intersecting across all of these themes. We live in a world where our society and our work is changing and changing rapidly, and the pandemic will have only accelerated that further. So we need to increase Irish university capacity to extract and adapt high demand modules from existing programmes, and to develop tailored courses to suit the needs of enterprise and lifelong learning. I know this is something the sector is up for, and I know that we as a government must match their ambition with adequate funding as well. What better place to nurture the entrepreneurial spirit than among the student population in our third level institutions? Developing a future workforce with an entrepreneurial mindset is crucial to Ireland's success in addressing challenges and in harnessing opportunities. Our next generation of entrepreneurs and innovators require the best possible foundation from our higher education system, and the government is committed to improving the support structures we have in place for entrepreneurs and for startups. And today I just want to briefly mention some of the initiatives that we have in place to try and embed entrepreneurship within higher education and to try and support students becoming more entrepreneurial. The first thing I'd reference is the Student Entrepreneur Awards. These are aimed at stimulating entrepreneurship among third level colleges and to get students thinking about starting their own business as a viable career option once they graduate. It gives young entrepreneurs practical, real-life experience of setting up their own business. It encourages them to think about entrepreneurship and self-employment as a viable career choice after college. And for any students linked in today, please do think about this. The closing date for receipt of entries is fast approaching. It's the 11th of March, and 10 teams will be selected in June to share in a €35,000 cash prize fund. Especially as we reopen and emerge from restrictions, I think it's a really good time to try and get those entrepreneurial juices flowing amongst our student population. In relation to nurturing startups in higher education, I would like to highlight a couple of excellent initiatives from Enterprise Ireland within the third level sector. One in particular, the collaboration between industry and higher education as part of the campus incubation centres. EI has now invested over €60 million in each university and Institute of Technology campus, and between them now housing over 350 companies employing over 1,870 people. A real example of entrepreneurship and the startup culture embedded within third level. And these incubation centres greatly improve the survival and the growth prospects of startup campus companies. Of course, we need to do more though, and to share some thoughts on this today. We need to make sure that as we review curricula and look at curriculum and look at the composition and the modules of courses, that we embed entrepreneurship in all that people study. No longer can there be the day that you learn about entrepreneurship if you study a business degree. We need to make sure that no matter what your flair, what your passion, what your discipline is, that you are exposed to entrepreneurship. You're exposed to entrepreneurial ways of looking at things and thinking of things that you're passionate about and how that could be converted into becoming a startup or a business. So I would, of course, encourage the third level sector as it continues to expand and develop and modernise and evolve to consider how to embed that entrepreneurial curriculum within all disciplines. We need to use the regional skills fora, which fall within the remit of my department. These are the forums in all of the regions that bring together business and bring together education partners to discuss the skills needs. We need to make sure that they're more inclusive of startups and smaller companies. We need to look at the entrepreneurship model. We now have a new action plan on apprenticeships. We saw more apprenticeships register in this country than ever before in the history of the state last year, 8,607 new apprentices. We need to look, though, at how we can broaden the range of apprenticeships. And my commitment today to any startup or indeed to any organisation is we will work with you to develop apprenticeship programmes that embed entrepreneurship and provide those opportunities as well. And when it comes to our research plan, and we will publish Ireland's new National Research Strategy in March, we need to make sure that that research strategy is based on the concept of grand challenges, encouraging the best and the brightest to see opportunities to step forward and to come up with ideas to address some of the biggest societal challenges we face. I'm also conscious, and in closing, I would acknowledge this. We've invested a lot more in third level education in recent years. We now spend more on it than ever before in the history of our state. But we also need to make sure now that we put a sustainable funding model in place and that we remove any barriers to access regarding the cost of education. And you can expect to hear more from us on that in recent weeks. I look forward to the panel discussion and to hearing people's thoughts. Gurmagat.
Gurmagat, Harris, and thank you, Minister Harris, once again for your participation in today's event. So we look forward to hearing your comments after this panel on student entrepreneurship and third level startups, of course we're going to start now. I'll just say maybe to begin with that student entrepreneurship and third level startups, they've been identified as a key driver of future economic growth by the European Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture, Education and Youth, Maria Gabriel, who's been a strong advocate for the startup sector across Europe. And Scale Ireland and Martina have met with the Commissioner several times over the past 12 months to make sure that Ireland's doing everything it can to promote students, entrepreneurship and startups in third level. Today we have an excellent set of panellists for the topic today, which includes a range of people from successful student entrepreneurs, including myself as a past student entrepreneur, to individuals driving the innovation and entrepreneurship agenda from the top of their organizations, to others who are supporting, advising, and funding the ecosystem we have of third-level startups and spin-outs across the country. And good afternoon to all our panelists. I'd like to start perhaps with a student entrepreneur, if I may. Hi to Conor Lydon, who is the CEO of Trust App. And Conor, I know going down your path to becoming an entrepreneur, it was somewhat aided by a final year elective module you took on entrepreneurship. And aligning to what the Minister has said, do you think we're doing enough to, I suppose, help show students what it's like to be an entrepreneur, but also to how to go about developing the skills, because there are skills involved in being an entrepreneur. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that and your own journey.
Yeah, that's correct. So I was an engineering undergrad when I came up with the original idea behind Trust App. I think, it's improved a lot, but I don't think we're doing enough yet, personally. I think that, like, as the Minister alluded to, every student, regardless of their degree, should have an opportunity to take undergrad electives around entrepreneurship and learn about what it means to start a business. Like, I was very fortunate that I was on one of, I think, the only STEM courses where it was an option. And particularly in those kind of courses, you'll have, a phenomenal amount of kind of very intelligent people coming up with really good ideas. And I think that's exactly where they need to get exposure to entrepreneurship as early as possible. Like, I had no idea what entrepreneurship was or how to start a business. And I think that's where the vast majority of students that were at my stage would be as well. There just isn't enough kind of known about it early enough. And I think as well, another thing that would help is incentives for the startups themselves to actually take students on placements and internships, because very often they can't afford to do it. And if that was incentivized, I think that would help a lot as well.
Great. When do you think they should take these, this opportunity to learn these skills? Like you mentioned, you'd done it in final year. Should it be earlier on? You said this should be as early as possible. Is this something that should be done in third year, second year? When should they learn these skills?
Well, yeah, I think so, because if you think about a student and, if they're doing a 4-year degree, very often they'll have maybe their mind made up about where they need to go afterwards, or grad programs. Generally, you start applying for them maybe a year before your final year. So
okay.
I think as early as possible, and it does have to be kind of get to the point where it is a viable career opportunity. It's not like it can be comparable to a grad program in the Big Four or something like that, because I think, when you are a student, it's actually a great time to give something like that a go. You mightn't have a family yet where you have, big financial commitments, and you can, put the time that's required into it. So I think, that's a huge opportunity, and there's not enough students doing it at the moment. But I think, there have been improvements. So hopefully that continues over the next couple of years.
Thanks, Conor. And what do you see as being the main barriers to becoming a student entrepreneur?
I think ultimately it comes down to funding. Anyone that is going to become successful will have to have access to it eventually. Like, there are bootstrap businesses, and there is a pathway there from the local enterprise offices up through Enterprise Ireland and eventually maybe to raise money privately, but it's not suitable to all businesses. And I think just not enough people know about it. I think if people were aware of all the options available to them, if everyone was aware of all the options available to them, there probably would be more student entrepreneurs, but it's not widely spoken about. And I also think, there just needs to be a bit more diversity there as well, and an understanding of maybe more of the newer types of business models that might require, say, more capital upfront versus some different businesses that can kind of do it in a more bootstrapped way. So I think that's probably the main barrier.
Okay. Thanks very much, Conor. So we're also delighted this afternoon to have Professor Maggie Cusick, who's the president of Munster Technological University, with us. Maggie, you're welcome to the panel. And in today's Scale Ireland State of Startup Survey, a quarter of respondents said that more support at university level could help increase the number of female founders in Ireland. So what do you think could be done here to help?
Thank you, John. I'm delighted to be here. I'd start by saying that we do have significant experience of this particular issue at MTU. We've been running programs for women entrepreneurs since 2011. So an example of that would be our Excel program, Excel with 2 X's. And since then, we've trained over 270 female founders and entrepreneurs through those women-only programs. So from our experience, we can see that those programs are most effective when they are linked in with key stakeholders, with Enterprise Ireland. Other examples might be banks or local authorities. So they seem to work really well there. Women are more likely to actually sign up for them and participate in them when they are women only and when they're on a part-time basis to really balance with other aspects of their life and responsibilities. Now, we can ask questions about that as a society, but I think it's important to start from where we are and to recognise that. And we heard in the panel earlier about the importance of role models. So I think role models like we've seen today, and well done to Scale Ireland that we do have gender balance, in all of the panels. I think all of those subliminal messages are really important, and it's important throughout that support for entrepreneurship. So in other words, your mentors, the people who come in to speak about entrepreneurship, the investors, to really normalise that. I think would make a really big difference. And for MTU, we're absolutely committed to continue to provide women-only entrepreneurship programs on that basis. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Maggie. And actually, in the startup survey today, actually one of the key points was that role models are essential for this. So again, not a coincidence, because it definitely is needed. So in general, for entrepreneurship in universities, do you think we need more investment to make it more mainstream? Like we heard from Connor earlier on about getting greater participation or even greater awareness of entrepreneurship among students. I often kind of say that it should be a little bit like taking a stats course. You should have the skills to be able to become an entrepreneur if you want to, and at least get exposure to it. So what kind of programs do you think could help with this in universities?
Yeah, I think the KT Boost programme funded by Enterprise Ireland, that's really welcome, because that will, invest into the universities and really put the responsibilities onto the universities for scale up and really high potential scale up. So that's very welcome. We know that academic time is really precious. Just think about the models that really drive those behaviours and enable academics with the expertise to really spend time in the entrepreneurship. At MTU, we're really keen to introduce design thinking programs for staff and for our postgrads to really encourage that entrepreneurship mindset. And Minister Harris made really important points about having, training in entrepreneurship throughout our degrees and our curricula, and I think that's fundamentally important. You mentioned apprentices, so think about our apprentices, think about other groups of our student body, our musicians, our artists. It's very likely they're going to be working for themselves, so let's make sure that they are fully equipped with the skills to make sure that they can succeed. I would highlight Student Inc. I think I've been so impressed with what happens there with Student Inc., where our undergraduates are actually pitching, to our incubation centres, coming up with their best ideas. And the top ones are then selected. They're funded over the summer and they're fully supported in every aspect of entrepreneurship to really grow their ideas. So I think Student Inc. Has been a real great success in MTU. It's rolled out into other universities and to the IoT. So really providing that regional focus, regional provision. Our funding's up. We're in a nice position just now that we have a very generous donation from an entrepreneurial member of our alumni, and we're using that to then provide scholarships for future members of Student Inc. And I think there's some nice sort of virtuous cycle associated with that, where a successful entrepreneur is then feeding in, and we're helping newly founding entrepreneurs. That's lovely. But I think this would be a really great example of a scheme that could be rolled out across the state, and I think it would pay excellent dividends.
Thanks, Maggie. That's a great idea. So I'll move on to our next panellist, Professor John O'Halloran, who's the President of University College Cork. Welcome, John, to the panel. And John, we've heard about apprenticeship, from the Minister and just there from Maggie. What do you think about the role of apprenticeship in entrepreneurship? Because it's often said that entrepreneurship is kind of like a craft, that it lies somewhere between an art and a science, and you can basically learn this craft by doing or by experiencing it from other entrepreneurs.
Thanks, John. Thank you very much, and great to hear the Minister. And before I answer that question, I just think COVID must have been past, because it's lovely to hear the Minister talking about his vision, actually, for Innovation Ireland, Innovation of Talent, and International Ireland, because that to me is the tapestry that we are all working together. And Professor Cusack, myself, and the ETBs, we've been trying to support an ecosystem here in Cork. And I think that connectivity that fits into the overall national ambition, and then of course into smart enterprise, into Europe, is really what's important to me. And a part of that, of course, is the idea of apprenticeship. And we in an earlier session we had Fiona Murphy, Dr. Fiona Murphy, from the APIS project. A PhD is an apprenticeship model. So I mean, we can find many examples. And the Minister has been really generous in supporting not just the apprenticeships themselves, and I'll come back to that in a moment, but the notion of the HCIs, and Maggie's referenced design thinking. For example, the Human Capital Initiative, which came out of the Minister's Department, has supported a significant acceleration of design thinking in a programme that we have here at UCC. So it seems to me that we need to look at different layers, and the layers really, and again, the Minister mentioned ecosystem. I'm an ecologist myself, and I think we know the interdependencies that are happening. And we've got Dr. Helen McBreen here, we see later, and we need funding. And the Atlantic Bridge, for example, is one part of that ecosystem. We've got the talent inside the institution across all the ranges of disciplines. We've got our advisory boards. We've got Ignite in UCC. We've got our talented student program. So putting all those together, I think we can really have an exciting opportunity, of which apprenticeships are part of that. And I think it's really important that we recognize that. And I think there's a real exciting, and Maggie mentioned the whole area of creativity and musicians. And I must declare a conflict here. I have one in my own house who exactly had to do this, who had to generate a business for themselves and learn the skills as they went along, and doing by learning, but also doing by the peer support that we can put in place. So I think the apprenticeships are really important part of this ecosystem, and I think we would strongly support that across a range of areas. And I know Professor Cusack and I and the ETB, we've been perhaps looking at decarbonisation and the creative practice as a way that we might accelerate the growth of that kind of area in this region.
That's great, John. And I think the point there about design thinking is well made, being able to experience that, talking to the customer and empathising with them, which is something you can only really get by being with a startup where they are talking to their customers, and experiencing that is something that I think anybody could learn from. Like we heard earlier on about lifelong learning, and I wanted to ask you, how do you think entrepreneurship fits into the skills that could or maybe should be obtained by more, maybe even all students, as we mentioned earlier on with Connor, whether they're undergraduates or postgraduates? And this ties into, I think, a concept you have in UCC of life-wide learning, I suppose, as well as lifelong learning.
Yeah, and I think, Conor gave a good example that I think he took a program in our university there in the Cubs, in our business school, on entrepreneurship. And I think, there'll be elements of it always that are embedded in the curriculum. And, there are some constraints in curriculum. So, for example, a lot of the accredited programs are actually constrained in many ways. Some of the engineering ones, yes. Medicine, yes, and others. But I don't think that should be the constraint in itself. So I think it's about actually creating pathways and opportunities for people to find that support. But the Taoiseach earlier said about culture, and this is the culture of the organisation as much as the culture of entrepreneurship. And maybe all of us, including universities, we all focus on success. We focus on grades and accomplishment. And actually, my understanding, and I'm saying this from a lay part in terms of entrepreneurship, is that you also need failures, and you have to try and try again until you succeed. So I think there's a piece of the culture that we need to inculcate in our curriculum, on the side of the curriculum, which we call the life-wide learning, to enable those skills that Connor and others have developed in terms of the business skills, but also the communication skills, the entrepreneurial skills in themselves, are really critical. So embedding in the curriculum, beside the curriculum, and then student societies are also really important in this. I have the privilege of judging the BT Young Scientist, and we had you've got entrepreneurs and innovators starting there, and then we can help them and grow them and bring them into the institution, and they inspire us and they change us as well. So there's no easy answer, and I think as an ecologist, I think I talk about diversity. We talk about diversity in many ways, but I think we need a diverse approach to entrepreneurship. So putting it in lots of places, supporting it in lots of places, but peer support, structures, mentors, and role models are critical.
Thank you very much, John. So you've already had a shout out already today, Helen, but I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Helen McBreen, who is a partner with Atlantic Bridge Ventures. And again, thanks to Atlantic Bridge for supporting today's event and Scale Ireland in general. Helen, research-intensive companies, they have a lot of needs, I suppose. They need access to a wide range of investment in order to be successfully able to scale from Ireland. But we also know that these companies are known to be significant economic drivers. So what else can we do to increase their access to a larger variety of capital, which they really need?
Thanks, John. So maybe let's start with what has been done and what's already delivering impact, and we can maybe scale up from there. So for those that don't know us, Atlantic Bridge, we're one of Europe's top performing growth funds. And in our family of 8 funds, we have over 125 million now dedicated across state funds, university funds, and commercialising extensively validated research from Ireland's third-level institutions. And we're scaling these companies into the next generation of deep tech companies that are delivering global impact and also, importantly, delivering economic impact for Ireland. We've over 35 companies invested now in the portfolio, and combined they've raised over 400 million, creating over 500 high-tech jobs. And the companies have fostered really important strategic collaborations with research institutions nationally here in Ireland and also internationally. And they're also attracting international investors into their companies. And the University Fund, it's a unique partnership between Atlantic Bridge, and it's the collaborative approach here is really important. And this is what makes this unique to our ecosystem, and it's what's helping deliver impact. It's a partnership between ourselves and Ireland, the European Investment Fund, AIB, and really significantly here, 4 of our universities. So UCC, thank you, John, NUI Galway, UCD, and also Trinity, who were involved from the outset. And the goal here is to maximise the benefit from research that takes place in our higher education sector. And some of the startups that we've heard from today include Fiona's company, Apis Protect, Parsa's company, Alien, Siren, John Breslin, you were involved in it from the very early stages as well. Provera Medical from Trinity, and Ireland's first quantum computing company as well out of UCD. And these are just some examples of the 35 companies that are all delivering economic impact here in Ireland. And the ask for this audience is to help us create and nurture the ecosystem so that we can deliver more of these. The fund has been internationally recognised, and this is really important because it's putting Ireland on the global innovation map. It's one of a growing trend of successful university funds, and we have others at research hubs at Oxford and Cambridge, and in Harvard and Stanford, at MIT, John, where you were involved as well. And central to the success of this fund and any fully functioning startup ecosystem are 2 things. One is talent, which we've talked about today, so human capital and investment in that. And the second, and one that we really must prioritise, is further investment. We have internationally recognised researchers in the country here. We have centres of excellence in our third-level research system, and we have to prioritise the development of human capital. The commercial and entrepreneurial talent that is needed to create new ventures is really essential to creating a pipeline of successful companies. And we have to prioritise government commitment to the venture investor landscape as well, that can enable research-intensive companies to access really essential capital as they scale from Ireland and scale globally. So we do need significant increases in investment in funds that are managed by firms with a track record of delivering returns and delivering impact. We also need new funds in the market that can invest at the very earliest stages and right through companies as they scale. And furthermore, we need investment in the unique platforms that are already delivering for the country and for the companies that are spinning out of universities and startups that are coming from the entrepreneurship programs that the universities and ITs are investing in.
Thanks, Helen. And, it's been great to hear today from some of those companies that you've mentioned. And, I suppose the real kind of human part there in terms of the jobs that have been created and, the skills and the skill talent that have been attracted to Ireland as well. So that's been, I think, it's been great to hear from you in terms of how this need, but also from the universities in terms of how they're supporting that as well. So can you tell me, how do you think we can further encourage and leverage that key thing, which is investment, into third level spin-outs? Because, it's also about those spin-outs coming from research as well. as well as student entrepreneurship?
Sure. So funded research is the foundation for generating IP that can deliver economic impact. So that's where we need to start. But to ensure, Ireland is able to compete on the global stage, we need to have, increased volume and quality of IP. And the percentage of Ireland's GDP spent on research, it's good, but it must be raised. International experience has taught us that this is a virtuous cycle that can deliver economically. So the more that we put into our system from a GDP perspective into research, the more we will get out of it. So the things that we can do, and these are suggestions and things that have been talked about on other panels, but things that I think that do need prioritized attention. So one is, increasing Ireland's reputation as a hub for the translation of research into innovative companies. It will not only serve our country well, but it will also attract other international startups and other international entrepreneurs, such as Partsa, who we'd heard from Alien earlier on, to come here and scale their businesses from Ireland. The higher education institutes themselves, they have to combine that cutting edge research with a teaching on market awareness, product development, and that entrepreneurship, educational aspects that Conor Lighton has benefited from. I think embedding a commercially focused ethos in research centres as well, in our tech centres at an academic level, will support the growth of tech companies from those centres and expand the career opportunities as well, importantly for graduates who are going on to third level, going on to master's and PhD programs after their undergraduates. We need to continue to stimulate a really diverse, and John O'Halloran, I completely agree with you here, we have to stimulate a diverse culture of entrepreneurship within our college campuses, through supporting entrepreneur in residence programs, student startup competitions, support for our youngest scientists and engineers also as well, and ensure that that co-founding programs with academics and commercially minded entrepreneurs enable that kind of matchmaking to happen in order to create co-founded programs or co-founding programs for companies. And I think further consideration should also be given to attracting overseas entrepreneurs to Ireland and to our industry executives out of corporates into our early stage companies. And we've plenty of examples of all of these different things within the portfolio of companies that Atlantic Bridge has invested in over the last 6 years. And I think these examples allow people to, if you see it, you can be it. There are a number of our companies that are founded by people who have come through the supports within the university ecosystems, either at undergraduate or later stage levels. And examples of that include Provera Medical, where we had the founders of that program meeting after the BioInnovate program in Galway. And that company has recently gone on to raise 30 million international Series A investment. Equal One is the first quantum computing company, as mentioned, with UCD, and the company has within UCD and in the USA, and has recently achieved significant EU commitments as well to the scaling of that company. And what's really important here is the collaborative approach that's taken by the teams and the supports that the universities are giving the teams as well in order to scale. And we've companies such as Timpani Medical out of NUI. Dr. Liz McLaughlin there is working with the Mayo Clinic, and another Trinity spin-out, One Projects, have built teams in Ireland and Germany. So the commonality here is that these companies are started in Ireland, they're scaling from Ireland, they're collaborating internationally, and they're building their teams, but they've all benefited from some supports, and we need to further invest in those supports so we have increased the quality of the pipeline coming out of our university system, John.
Thanks, Helen. And I think a point well made there as well about attracting skilled and talented entrepreneurs to Ireland, but also skilled talent, because we've heard from Partsa earlier on, and obviously, his story in terms of attracting his team to Ireland, but also you mentioned, various companies that I think were founded by researchers who came from abroad, came to Ireland, and then would have gone down the spin-out route as well. So again, there's a couple of routes there. There's no one path, but it's great to be able to facilitate all of those as well. I was going to ask a question for Kevin Marshall, but I don't think Kevin is on at the moment. Kevin, you are there actually, sorry. Kevin, welcome to the panel, and again, thanks to Microsoft for supporting today's event. Dr. Kevin Marshall is the Head of Education with Microsoft Ireland. Kevin, COVID and cloud are two words that we mightn't have associated together before this pandemic, but I think we now really associate them with remote working, with distributed collaboration. And you know, during the pandemic, I managed to write 2 books and never meeting my co-author or publishers or publicists or anybody, and shopping to the door. You know, all of this being enabled by the cloud and of course pushed forward by COVID. And my question to you is, how do we better equip our students to adapt to the challenges and, you know, the associated opportunities from these challenges, and be ready to develop any kind of next wave of startups and associated product portfolios required for the future?
Yes, thank you, and it's nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Yes, that's a very detailed question. I mean, I think one of the things, and it's on the other panels, and actually in the conversation before I just address the question quickly, directly, is that the skill set to empower students with the necessary skills starts much earlier. It actually starts in primary school, I think, and I think we'll see a lot of work over the coming years. The research coming out of the States particularly has talked about STEM at 6 and 7 year olds, and more so the notion of computational thinking or complex problem solving, which is what we've tried to do in DreamSpace over the last 4 years at various different levels, primary, secondary. And I think we've learned a lot in how the technology can support to enable that learning. And I think the national conversation is the conversation we're having today about what skills are required. Just wondering, am I gone there?
No,
can you hear me okay?
I can still hear you, Kevin, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. It's just a bit, sorry, it looks flaky from my side. So I think that's really important. And I do think the conversation, the national conversation, where it should be about this stuff and driving research and development and innovation and all that sort of stuff, rather than kind of focus on the old model of the leaving cert and that. And I think that's something Taoiseach said this morning. I think that we should be very mindful about that, coupled with a conversation about diversity, inclusion, access for everybody in whatever way we think that's appropriate as we emerge from the pandemic. So I think that's really important. And actually, we'll see a really good example of the work we're doing with Science Foundation Ireland, Maynooth, Munster Technology University, RDI Hub on Monday night on Changemakers, where Katrina Sullivan will talk about STEM Passport, which is an attempt to really support women in technology at kind of transition year to really learn about the skills and actually link them with mentors, which is something that has come up earlier on, which is really critical, because I think you have to be shown how to do it. And I think the other stuff that's really, like entrepreneurship in itself is hard, right? And Bill Lau in the earlier panel said, and we, you got to make payroll on Friday. And, that's a very tough thing to do. And I think not all of us are gifted with those abilities, but I think the learning, the understanding, the design thinking, the rethinking of curriculum, as the minister said, the reframing of learner-centered curriculum for the apprenticeships, all that is really relevant. And I think what I've seen in terms of the cloud is that the last 2 years has accelerated. We do everything differently now. We were able to work with John O'Halloran and UCC through using Teams to make sure the university was able to work and function. That was a great opportunity to be able to do that. We've been able to do that across the globe. We'll do that some other institutions and ETBs and schools across Ireland. But I do think it's fundamentally changed how we work, but it's accelerated. And I think, from the teaching and learning perspective, is that my work over the last number of years, you would have found that potentially there was a sort of a fear of the technology. I think that in the main has changed, particularly at the teaching level. And I think the students have embraced the relevant tools they need. Now, I don't think it will or should ever replace the face-to-face interaction between students and teachers. But I think there is a hybrid model that makes sense. And I think part of the work now actually is, what does that look like? And I think that's going to emerge over the coming years. And I think that would position Ireland very well for the future, to be a hub of excellence across learning, which gets all this ecosystem around startups and entrepreneurship and so forth.
Thanks, Kevin. And I know you were recently involved in the John McCarthy AI Summer School, and that to me looked like a great place where the techies, if I can call them that, the students and the researchers from the artificial intelligence, machine learning, and robotics worlds were brought together with speakers from corporate and research and startup innovation worlds. And we've heard earlier on about role models and the importance of that. And my question, I suppose, is how can we get more of those role models from the startup world to show those tech types how it gets done, and also perhaps to inspire them to maybe to see the potential for greater impact in their work by either joining or even forming their own startup?
Well, I mean, I think that the concept that Liam Cronin and I conceived at the AI John McCarthy School was to enable that, and we've got 2 years of that now. And unfortunately, it's been through the pandemic, which means people don't get to come to Kerry and that beautiful part of the world and experience that, which was all part of the idea in the first place. But I think we now have a model that works. There is interest. This year, we added a much stronger research function led by Munster Technology University and Trinity. I think now there is a much more focus now on what you've just said. How could we bring more entrepreneurs, more tech entrepreneurs to tell their story, and both the good and the bad, which I think is really important. And I think, back to the earlier point, it's the notion of failure is really important here as well, because in some regards, you learn more by what didn't work than actually what worked. And I think those are really core principles that we should be thinking about. And we build that in to curricula, to schools, to everything that we do.
Thanks very much, Kevin. So I'd like to move to Dr. Siobhan Roach. Siobhan is the Director of Science for the Economy with Science Foundation Ireland. And welcome, Siobhan. It's good to see you at today's panel. We have some amazing innovative researchers in our SFI-funded programs and centres. And I know from direct experience being involved in a number of them. And we know also that they've got many inventions that are suited to commercialisation. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think we can do to help encourage more of those innovators to go down the entrepreneurship route? Because it is a path that maybe not all of them consider.
Thanks, Donna, and thanks for the invitation to speak today. It's been an incredibly interesting event. I suppose a lot of the comments in terms of supporting the overall system and coming at this from a funder of STEM in the university, the higher education sector, I suppose the importance of that world-class research ecosystem and developing these talented researchers that are able to develop novel ideas, develop the entrepreneurial mindset, and really have the skills and the confidence to pursue an entrepreneurial route is really important. That's been highlighted by many of the speakers this morning. I suppose Ireland, we're currently rated as a strong innovator, but not a leading innovator. And we certainly have an ambition within our strategy within Science Foundation Ireland to change that. I suppose education, we've heard numerous speakers talk about the importance of education, strengthening that entrepreneurial culture in HEIs. And I suppose within Science Foundation Ireland over the last number of years, through our centres and other programmes that we support, we have been trialling out a variety of approaches to really try to get more researchers engaged in entrepreneurship. And I suppose when I talk about researchers, we're probably mainly focusing at postgraduate level onwards. And I think one of the most successful approaches that we have found to date is this partnership that we run with the National Science Foundation, which is the Innovation Core program. This is a program that was developed in the NSF, basically based on Steve Blank, the entrepreneur kind of lean startup methodology. And it's all about training people in evidence-based entrepreneurship, where researchers will bring in ideas and then go out and test them into the market. It's a very successful program in the US, and Ireland is the only country that has a formal partnership with the NSF in this area. So that really stands to the overall quality of research and the esteem that we're held in Ireland. I suppose, and we have had some great successes that have come out of that. Probably one of the more recent ones is a company called, it was originally called Septec Evium, I think it's now called, and that was only the two companies that secured funding from the latest round of the European Innovation Council Award. So it really speaks to the value of the overall approach. I suppose the challenge is that it's difficult to do it at the scale that's needed to really bring about the change that we need in the system. So what we're now looking at is there kind of a precursor to that, where you can train more people in this evidence-based entrepreneurship approach, and starting to bring in people from the research offices, from the technology transfer offices, get them trained up. And it's all about almost developing coaches within the university to then coach other researchers to encourage them to get engaged in the program. This is still in really early days, but I think there's some positive signs about how we can really kind of roll this out at scale. I suppose some of the other parts that I would say need to really be looked at is it's really critical that we have a simplified and an agile early stage funding support system for the academic research, and that it's really suited to the needs of all sectors, and that really making it attractive to those that are considering going down the entrepreneurship route. And one thing I suppose also that has struck me is that when considering how do we encourage more researchers to go down this route, is I suppose in terms of early career researchers, there's a lot of focus right now on supporting, making a very clear academic track for early career researchers. I suppose listening to some of the talks this morning, it's very clear that there are a lot of programs within the universities to support an entrepreneurial career track, and maybe there's more that we can do to really highlight the attractiveness of that approach, and whether there's mechanisms where we can put researchers, allow them to spend time in early stage companies that are being developed by serial entrepreneurs and really get exposure to what it's like to work in that environment, and that may then incentivize them to actually take the leap and to start up their own company.
That's great to hear, Siobhan. We know that most PhDs don't actually end up in academia anyway, that they go out into companies, and having that entrepreneurship track would make a lot of sense in terms of, and also as you say, showing them the success stories like the EIC funded company you mentioned that went through the I-Core program with SFI and the NSF. So that's really fantastic. In Scale Ireland, we often talk a lot about enterprises that are driven by innovation or innovation-driven enterprises. So at their core, they've got some kind of technology innovation or science innovation. And I was going to ask you, because you mentioned the I-Core partnership, what other kinds of partnerships can we use to help create more of these research innovation-driven enterprises, so that we can hopefully create even more unicorns in Ireland and, of course, create jobs, but also drive higher returns for the Irish economy?
Absolutely, and I think there's huge potential for a variety of partnership approaches here. One of the, I suppose I talked about the I-Core program, that is a methodology that now is at the core of our challenge-based funding programs that we are rolling out. These are, we heard Bill talk about earlier about the importance of diversity of teams tackling major challenges, societal challenges like climate change, and how that in itself can bring about commercial opportunities. I suppose challenge-based funding is an approach we have been developing, and it's all about partnership between innovators, beneficiaries, end users, both in identifying what are the problems that we should be going after, and then what are the solutions that would address that problem. I suppose another way that we've been looking at this is kind of looking internationally, and we're always kind of looking to see, well, how can we do better in supporting the overall ecosystem? We've been looking at a variety of public-private partnership models for accelerating academic research into the development of new spin-outs. And I suppose some of the things that we've been really struck by in looking at these models is the benefit of bringing professionals in from industry that have the appropriate expertise to steer the development of the academic research projects from an early stage and really accelerate them towards company formation. Also, the importance of professional project management approach and the opportunities for having cross-project learnings and really increasing the overall value of the IP offerings that come out of that. So what we are doing is kind of looking at those kind of models and saying, well, how can we adapt that into the Irish system, recognizing that there's a lot of aspects of the ecosystem that already exist. And I think John in his comments referenced those. And it's really, how do you pull all of this together into an integrated model that really allows you to kind of bring all the stakeholders that are needed to develop these projects, to accelerate them towards spin out, and then have the appropriate funding mechanisms there so that there's an agile fund so that you can get the follow-on funding you need without having to go through a new application process to a different funder. Pull it all together into an integrated model. This is something that we're looking at. It's still kind of an early stage concept, but we're really excited by the concept of it, and certainly having looked at aspects of this internationally, it has shown that you can bring about even a threefold acceleration in terms of the timelines of getting the research towards company creation.
Thanks, Siobhan. That's actually quite an impressive speed up. So that's interesting to hear. I suppose one of the key institutes in Ireland involved in Some of our deep tech research is at Tyndall National Institute. I'm delighted to have Peter Smith, who's the commercial director at Tyndall. Hi, Peter. We know that university entrepreneurship, while we talk often about teaching entrepreneurship and teaching students how to be entrepreneurs, there's also another aspect, which is what we've heard from Helen and Siobhan and others, is that spin-outs, that commercialization of the science and technology and knowledge transfer by our students and staff in the research field. And then, I suppose the other challenge is this deep tech, it needs more money, it costs more, it takes longer to develop, but of course it can have higher rewards, and it tends to be stickier, in terms of defending it, and you've got your patent portfolios and so on. So I want to ask you, from your angle, what are ways of making but also de-risking such ventures?
Yes, John, thanks very much, and congratulations to Scale Ireland. This is a great platform for this conversation, so it's great to be involved. So Tyndall as an organisation is 650 strong research community with very significant investment in infrastructure, and we're on a journey ourselves for scaling to double our impact in the coming years. And that includes the introduction of new research groups, for example, in wireless comms, but also, as Helen mentioned, our Quantum Computer Engineering Centre, which was launched last year. So it's interesting when you consider the Institute at that scale. It's really important to recognise that our engagement actually is split pretty much 50-50 down the line between multinationals and SMEs. So there's a very, very vibrant early stage and scaling SME community that engages with the research community across Ireland, and that's presented in that statistic from us. In relation to deep technology, there's been a lot of talk this morning about spinning out and using IP from the universities. Deep technology brings with it some of its own scaling challenges, and what we mean by that is that growing any business and any technology business is difficult, but when you look at deep tech, the journey is much longer and it's much more expensive. So if you consider that every venture is essentially about knocking down milestones within your funding horizon, Conor mentioned the funding earlier and how important it is to have the runway and the access to that funding. You've got to meet your milestones as you go. So de-risking the project is really, really important. And one of the ways of doing that is through the research communities. So that means tapping into the research talent on the island, tapping into the research infrastructure. In Tyndall, we have over 250 million euros worth of infrastructure supported by the Minister and the government. And it's important to generate the return from that. So deep tech organizations and startups can tap into that, use it, and see the return that they need. Just this week, we delivered product samples to Photonics West in California, based on many, many years of fundamental research followed by Enterprise Ireland commercialization funding. So you de-risk the deep science, and then as you look at the commercialization, you de-risk through other funding mechanisms, such as offered by Science Foundation Ireland and Enterprise Ireland in DTIF and in commercialization.
And Peter, I was going to ask you there, one of the challenges, I suppose, is, we have a lot of great scientists who create these, scientific or research innovations, but they often, they're maybe not willing to take that kind of leap in terms of talking to customers and doing what we often term as being the petrol and the engine of the startup, which is actually primary market research or customer discovery. So, in your experience, how do we, I suppose, help those researchers or PIs, as we call them, and I can speak as a scientist or an engineer myself because I'm in this space. So when I'm giving out about the researchers not being able to do this, it's okay. How do we help them, I suppose, to do that talking to customers bit and to see for the real applications for their deep tech?
So the answer to that question is that it's horses for courses, right? We tend to think of entrepreneurship in narrow terms, but it can't be that in the university sector, right? So it's very important actually that the research community is intimately involved. There are natural born CEO researchers, but there are also natural born CTO researchers or consulting researchers into those organizations. And it's important for that community to become part of the virtuous cycle that's involved here, because the spin-outs from our universities actually end up funding further research. Our own spin-outs have put tens of millions of euros back into the research community, and that spawns further entrepreneurship. So that aspect of investment in deep tech creates a conveyor belt essentially of innovation within the research community. I'd just like to point out that one of the key cohorts that is important in that discussion is the PhD and postdoc community. Sean O'Sullivan from SOSV Ventures, who's on our board, points out that many of the greatest ideas come from those early stage career researchers. And the last thing I would say is, when we talk about entrepreneurship, it's coming up on 20 years since I did my first tech research, first tech startup. I didn't know I was an entrepreneur. I just wanted to get a great idea into the market, right? So open up that concept within the research community, and you will tap into the likes of Fiona we heard from earlier, and the likes of Connor, that don't necessarily know that what they want to do is to be an entrepreneur. They want to get stuff done in the market. And if we think of it that way, we'll grow a greater cohort.
Great point, Peter. And pipeline is a word that's, I think, kind of come out in many ways today. Listen, thanks very much, Peter, and thank you to all of our panelists for today's discussion and for taking part in today's panel. It was really interesting and lots of great ideas there. And I'm sure, Minister, lots of food for thought. So maybe, if you wouldn't mind, if we could have a couple of comments from you, maybe on what you've heard today. I know there were some things that align to what you talked about earlier, but also maybe a few new ideas as well.
Yeah, look, thank you so much, John. I really enjoyed that panel discussion and the expert input that there was from a variety of perspectives. I mean, I heard the word investment several times, and I also heard the word culture several times, and we've got to combine the two. And I think this is a really important point. I mean, when we have panels and discussions, and I'm as guilty of this as everybody else, I mean, there's always a call for more investment, and be really clear, I accept the need for more investment. I think hand in hand with that, though, is, and John touched on this and others, but how you bring about the cultural change. And I referenced that in my own opening comments too. How do we create an entrepreneurial culture here in Ireland where the young adults that I was talking to in secondary school today, when they're deciding what they want to put on their CAO and what they want to study in a university, that they're not just thinking of what they want to qualify in and be an employee, but they're actually thinking of a business that they wish to set up or how they wish to come up with a great next idea. So I do think there's a bit of work we need to do around that. I'm very taken by Connor and obviously his very direct experience in relation to the benefit he was able to avail of by accessing entrepreneurial modules, but also that's not necessarily the norm. And I would come back again to that need to embed. I know of one university in our country who has completely reviewed their curriculum to look at how they can embed entrepreneurship in the curriculum across all of their disciplines. That is the way to go. I certainly think that is the way to go. And I take away Connor's point about the need to then actually provide incentives for the startup companies to be able to take in students themselves. I think that's something very practical that we could make some progress on. Just a couple of other comments. Again, we heard of lifelong and life-wide learning. I like that phrase too. But I do think when we're talking about students and we're talking about the benefits that the higher education sector can provide to startups, we need to also recognize that not every student is 18, 19 or 20. And more the profile of the student is going to be more diverse. And I think a challenge for us collectively is going to be to the person out there today who has a great idea, or the person out there today who wants to take the leap and wants to establish a business. How can the higher education sector provide them with access to training, with access to modules in a way that works for somebody with a couple of dependents, a full-time job and a mortgage.
Like Springboard courses.
Springboard courses being one. Again, I think we got it from Kevin there, the hybrid model of learning. You know, there'll be some students who'll want the full throttle experience of the Freshers Week and the RAG Week and all those good things that can go on in campuses. And there's others who, for a variety of reasons, just want to be able to get the study done in the evening after a long day at work. And as we have the sustainable funding model with higher education, that is going to be a kind of key ask as to what does the 21st century higher education system look like. I know we're probably somewhat caught on time, but just I think we had again a reference around PhDs and also reference to access. I'm taking away this to commit to doing more on this, and we have to recognise that there are very serious financial barriers in terms of access and inclusion for both master's programmes and PhDs in Ireland. And if we want diversity of thought and diversity of background, we need to address that, and we'll come forward with proposals in relation to that. And just the final piece maybe that I would mention is the whole concept of research funding. And Helen spoke very passionately and strongly about this. I mean, it is a statement of fact that Ireland is investing more in research. The problem is so are all our competitors. Yes. and we now need to try and actually get ahead of that in terms of closing the gap. And we'll bring forward our new national research strategy for Ireland in March. But I was nearly running out of paper with all the ideas coming out today. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Minister. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Minister, and our panel of guest speakers. That concludes Scale Ireland's first regional summit. It's been a terrific success with hundreds attending online and 230 CEOs and founders contributing to our State of Startup survey. We're delighted that Taoiseach and also Ministers Harris and Mcgrath gave keynote addresses, and we want to thank all the entrepreneurs, investors, academics and experts for taking part, and especially John and Grania for chairing the discussions. We also want to thank our sponsors, Microsoft, Hadfield Green, Atlantic Bridge and Republic of Work for their support. Without them, this couldn't have taken place.
And we're also, Brian, very grateful to ABC here in Cork for today's fabulous production. It was a super job. And also to Jason Woodward of AD32 for the videos with entrepreneurs here in Cork. Today's event was the culmination of 8 months of planning with many twists and turns with COVID, and it would not have been possible without the work of our team. So thank you to Sheila, to Noel, to Luke, to Niamh, to DC here in Cork, and Dara for the promotional campaigns, and also to Dave. I also want to give out a shout out to Bibis from Microsoft for seeing this through. And a big thank you, a special thank you to May Olden, who has worked so hard on making this everything and everything run so smoothly. It really was a super job, and we're really looking forward to next year. So thank you also to everyone at home for their support. We look forward to the year ahead and creating the right conditions for startups to thrive. Thank you.